1 p.m. Welcome to the City Council session for today. And I have not, let's see, Councilor Harrison is chewing. I will not ask her to say the Pledge of Allegiance. I will say it. If we can all stand, we can. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. First, we have the consent agenda, and I will ask the city manager if there was anything pulled.
No, ma'am.
Okay. So do we have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Okay.
Second.
Second. All in favor of the motion, aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Right, ayes have it. And next, we go to public comment. I have we have recently, just want to remind everybody who is here for public comment that this is your chance to be heard by the City Council. We will not respond or engage or necessarily answer your questions. We will just be listening. And with that, I will call up the first person on the list, which is Curtis Johnson.
Good afternoon, Council and the Mayor. Congratulations. I'm here. I think I need to give my address first before I get started. No? Okay. I'm here on behalf of a 501c3 nonprofit organization named Mighty Men of Valor Outreach, and we're here asking the city and the council for $100,000 out of the budget for capacity building, operational costs, and direct services to fight mental illness and the opioid crisis. And our staff all are getting certified in peer support, and we're collaborating with Southlight as we will be submitting a application to the county for the settlement opioid crisis as well. And my program director is here, Ms. Gillespie, who has just retired from the women's prisons substance abuse department as administrator, and as well lost a child as a direct result of fentanyl crisis. As myself, lost a child 3 years ago as a direct result of substance abuse. So we are very committed into fighting this epidemic and helping people get healthy and live productive lives. So we're here asking if the city would consider partnering or collaborating with us. We have a landlord at that owns a property at 402 Bragg Street that is willing to lease that property to us for this project, as well as I've spoken with Ms. Karen Cook at Southlight, and we're in terms of collaborating on how we can collaborate to work towards the goal of stopping people from dying and saving lives. I also am here on another agenda with my nonprofit organization to do some affordable housing. My church home, located at 3300 Rock Quarry Road, Word of God Fellowship, well, they have 130 acres, and my pastor and the board have said that they would be willing to lease that property to my organization to help fight the housing crisis in our city. And we are at, but when I called the North Carolina Housing Agency, they told me that we must have someone who has developed as a partner on this project. So we're here hoping that the city will partner with us or lead us to a developer that will help us make this project come to fruition. Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming. Next, we have Joy Perez.
Good afternoon. My name is Joy Pears, and I'm here representing the Pointer YMCA. We're on Fayetteville Street in downtown Raleigh, and we are here asking you to extend the 2-hour free parking in the city parking decks. We have members that regularly use this new amenity to downtown and praise the efforts of our downtown organizers for creating this opportunity. Since the 2-hour free parking went into effect, we've seen an increase in both our memberships and our daily usage of our YMCA branch. Our year-over-year scanning has increased starting the day after the free parking went into effect. We saw almost 900 more scans in November of 2024 than in 2023, and almost 2,000 more scans in December, which was really impressive for us. Our group fitness classes are full, so we have the opportunity to add more and serve more people in downtown. The Pointer Y also works with the small business parking program. So we have 6 full-time staff that use that, but we also pay a parking stipend for our part-time staff, and most of that goes to the city lots because we are paying our staff, they pay you guys to continue to park there. So the extra 2 hours really helps us be able to stretch that budget for our Y further. The Pointer Y opened in 2018 with a large part of our goal to serve the people who were already in downtown. We had a good percentage of people who commuted into the area for work, along with promoting to the growing resident population. While parking was always a challenge for some, many already had parking options in downtown, or we could easily explain why the Y didn't offer free parking. Like many places, 2020 changed a lot of those things. We lost a significant portion of our membership when a lot of downtown companies moved to work from home. We made changes in how we promoted our classes to bring people in the doors, but that involved more people driving downtown and considering Pointer a destination Y. As we continue to build our membership, with those coming back to downtown and with the growing resident population, we still want to be able to serve those that see us as a destination and coming downtown, and the free parking helps with that. We understand this program is not without cost. We get that. We would ask you to consider the proposed options of earlier or additional parking fees for evenings on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, or throughout the weekend. As downtown has rebounded, those coming to downtown during those timeframes have come back quickest. They've come back more often, and they seem to be more willing to pay for parking in different areas. We really appreciate your consideration of keeping the 2-hour free parking in those city decks. The availability of that parking really boosts our membership overall for the Y, and it helps us to be able to continue to serve the downtown community well. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Ms. Octavia Rainey.
Good afternoon. I'm here to ask you, do not put the housing bond on the table unless this council is going over to the General Assembly to change the tax code. We have a very good opportunity of making that change because of Western North Carolina. They are coming to the General Assembly on that tax code because they are not happy with what's going on. I said to the city, you have a lobbyist. I have been a lobbyist. And the lobbyists don't meet with the citizens of Raleigh? I don't understand it. You pay the League of Municipalities to lobby as well. They don't meet with the citizens of Raleigh? I'm very surprised. It's like this is a secret, but it shouldn't be a secret. I know the taxes are high, and in Southeast Raleigh, we barely can pay our taxes. It is time to change the tax code, but we have the opportunity now to come in behind Western North Carolina. They will be at the General Assembly, and the tax code is on the table. If they make changes to Western North Carolina, they got to come in and make changes across the table. But we should be in a position where we are already organized, and our point is on the table. Now, if we don't take this opportunity to jump at this, then what are we doing? We just can't continue to put bonds on the table because they are a taxes. They are a tax. So what I'm saying to you is that you have Philip Isley, to my understanding, is the city lobbyist. Then you have the League of Municipalities that also you pay to lobby for you. It is about time that they come to the citizens of Raleigh to ask them, what do you want to see changed in the tax code? So at least they'll have a general idea of what they're over there doing. At least they'll know that you need to be in that table, in that room, when they talk about Western North Carolina. I was a lobbyist for 10 years. That was part of my job. Part of my job to go out and mobilize the community to come over to the General Assembly to lobby for what we want. Philip Isley should not be any different. Now, I don't know how much you pay him, but I know he needs to come to the citizens of Raleigh and tell us what is he over there lobbying for, and we need to put the taxes on the table. Western North Carolina is going to walk in, and we need to be at that table.
Thank you. Imani Cumberbatch.
Thank you for this opportunity and thank you for your leadership. I'm Imani Cumberbatch. I've worked at Marbles Kids Museum for 11 years. I'm the director of guest engagement and I'm on the senior leadership team. I oversee the guest experience on our campus every day, and that begins as they pull into downtown looking for parking. So we're asking that you extend the 2-hour free parking in the parking decks. Marbles serves over 500,000 visitors per year who come to downtown Raleigh from all 100 counties, all 50 states, and from dozens of countries from around the world. We love welcoming families, school groups, and chaperones to our state's capital city and pride ourselves on being one of the most accessible and most affordable large-scale children's museums in the nation. The recent addition of 2-hour free parking is a game changer for our guests. Giving our families who come from all walks of life access to free parking in a clean and safe location is one of the single most impactful things the City of Raleigh can do to support access to the informal learning environment that Marbles provides our community. In fact, we heard from residents of Wake County in a 2023 feasibility study performed by Gensler that one of the top reasons that kids and families don't come to Marbles is the affordability and accessibility of parking. Our core audience ages are birth to 10 years old. That's a lot of busy families with children and babies looking for spaces where they can safely unload away from the street. A lot of families and chaperones needing to maneuver their strollers, diaper bags, lunches, etc. By continuing this initiative, parking in downtown will become convenient and affordable for guests to visit often. In December alone, the cross-campus attendance at Marbles increased by 7%. And since providing 2-hour free parking in December and January, Marbles Play Store sales have increased 5%, and Marbles IMAX revenue is up 42% over the last year from December through January. By offering free parking, you've made the choice of coming to a movie in downtown Raleigh more affordable. Eliminating the barrier of parking fees for 2 hours has made immediate impact in Marbles, attracting more guests in downtown Raleigh. Our guests eat in the restaurants, they shop in the stores, they play in Moore Square. Our guests bring significant foot traffic to the Moore Square district, which helps increase public safety. I'm here speaking on behalf of Team Marbles and the thousands of families we serve, most of whom live in the greater Raleigh area, and ask that you continue to offer 2-hour free parking in clean and safe parking decks, particularly on the weekends. It helps downtown, it helps families connect through play at Marbles. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Nikki W.
Late Thursday night, I was downtown at Moore Square Station, and I made the announcement that they declared white flag for the night, as it was obvious that people didn't know by the number of people that were present. And so people grabbed up their things and they were making their way on the last bus over to the shelter. I personally wanted to assist one gentleman because he was elderly and had mobility issues. We called to the shelter. They said they didn't have transport. We called 211. We called all over. They said to call the RPD. A cab was $30 for 3 miles. I did not have that. After waiting in the freezing cold for over an hour, an officer, M.I. Hathaway, responded to the call in a pickup truck. I ran over to direct him. He immediately said he just came to tell us that RDU was not a cab service. He was not compassionate and unwilling to assist from the beginning of our meeting. During a 10 to 15-minute conversation, he made multiple offensive remarks about us, wanting other people to do it for us, that this was not a police issue, but an issue of poor planning. He stated his job was to lock people up and that he should be chasing a car that sped by, but instead he was stuck wasting time talking to us about a non-emergent matter. He stated we should go back where we came from, that the police's job was to keep criminals off the street, and did not see this situation as a safety issue or find it necessary as a preventative measure to save this man from the freezing temperature. Even though it was evident that the older man was in a state and told him that he had just come from the hospital a few days earlier, he showed no concern. We pled with him, me and 2 others, to make a one-time courtesy to assist this gentleman to the shelter, and he replied, unhoused people need to figure it out for themselves like everybody else. I continued to ask, and he finally stated he would make a call for the car, but it could take up to 2 hours, as they were responding to real calls. I told him I would bring up this issue in City Council to find a solution to the transportation factor, and as in the past, that shelters had required an escort after a certain time of night. He was asked if he attended, and with pride, he stated no, because he is responsible for himself and his actions, as if to say that people who come to bring up concerns are bringing about complaints that don't need to be made or should not be. This is the exact reason a compassionate response team needs to be expedited. There has been discussion in Raleigh for a while, but nothing has formed. Acorns does not serve as that. In other areas, this program has proven effective. Officer Hathaway, who immediately informed us that he was a supervisor, had no compassion for us because we were unhoused, had no money. His bad attitude is what leads to bad behaviors. If we had a compassionate response team, ideally the elderly man would have been transported to the shelter in less than half the time and without being belittled or discouraged as a human being. If 3 people had not been there to push for his transport that night, I believe it's possible that this man may have frozen to death, and we've already had 3 of those or more this past January. So please find this matter important enough to prioritize the compassionate response team.
Thank you. Next, we have Mamakai Sanders.
Good afternoon. It's another amazing day in paradise. That's a really hard act to follow. And it's really hard to stand up here and look into faces that sometimes look like they lack compassion, where I understand it's kind of like some of the things that are said are kind of like water to a duck. You just have to let it roll off. But the person that you're talking about that was in crisis is the person that you serve. And so that wasn't ever a part of my comments, but it just felt right to say, especially when there's no reciprocal conversation around important issues that have become exacerbated under the previous administrations. I actually wanted to talk about, I tuned in a little bit yesterday to the budget work session, and there were just some things that I wanted to share from my experience, because I did attend 6 of the sessions, 1 virtual in December and then all 5 for the districts. District C had the most diversity, but again, when you're only looking at approximately 30 people attending and about a third of them being staff, that doesn't say a lot. There was no representation that I could see or hear in people's conversation that represented anyone from the Latinx community. And so I've been wondering if any efforts have been made to bring exclusively Spanish-speaking conversations to a community that's grown by over 400% in the last few years. And that's not just for the budget, but for the comprehensive plan as well. And attending one of the sessions, one of the things I couldn't get answered was about how do public-private partnerships work. The gentleman who spoke, and I feel really bad for never remembering his name, but he was the speaker for the Reflecting Raleigh Stormwater conversation. This was a big part of him saying that solutions are brought by the citizens, and so public-private partnerships are really important. And so if something can be done to make that a little bit more clear about how the public can bring something to the city's attention that you might be able to partner with, instead of just waiting for an RFP to come out, that would be appreciated. And then in the last few seconds, I just want to suggest that if you could also have some information about the discretionary fund so that I can share that with people more easily, that would be greatly appreciated too. But thank you for your service, and I appreciate this opportunity to speak. Peace, y'all.
Thank you. All right, next, we have Nicholas Riddle.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and members of the City Council. My name is Nick Riddle, and I reside in the Battery Heights neighborhood with my wife, Billy, 6-year-old daughter, Zenaida, who's a first grader at Hunter Elementary School. My neighbor, Mindy Taylor, attended the most recent City Council meeting where she communicated the urgent need for safety improvements at the Tarboro Street and East Martin Street intersection in the wake of her 5-year-old son having been hit by a truck while walking home from school on January 29th. As the parent primarily responsible for walking my daughter to and from Hunter every day, I've experienced multiple close calls related to drivers not yielding to pedestrians in the crosswalk and had long feared that this worst-case scenario would come to pass. Following an incident in December where a car turning left from East Martin Street onto Tarboro Street nearly collided with a group of approximately 10 children and adults, which included my daughter and myself, I organized ongoing communications between concerned neighborhood parents in order to seek solution to address these safety issues. Mindy provided us with an update about planned changes to the intersection following the remarks she made to the council last week and her subsequent discussion with the city's transportation director. I was pleased to learn about some of the planned initiatives to improve safety at this intersection. From what I understand, there are plans to repaint reflective markings on the street, place yield to pedestrian signs by the traffic lights, place flexible delineator posts at the crosswalk, and plans to work with RPD on increasing traffic enforcement on Martin and Tarboro streets. These would be welcome changes in addition to the improvements that I and other neighbors have already made note of. These include updates to the pedestrian signal at the crosswalk, which now gives pedestrians a head start when crossing, as well as recently added signage on Tarboro Street showing the school zone speed limit and the rate of speed of drivers traveling down the road. Based on feedback I've received from a neighbor with an expertise in street design, I'd also like to advocate for speed bumps to be placed as a lane divider on East Martin Street to slow down traffic turning onto Tarboro Street. I'd further like to push for improvements at the intersection of East Hargett Street and Tarboro Street, which, similar to East Martin Street and Tarboro Street intersection, is poorly marked and potentially hazardous for pedestrians crossing the road. Thank you for your time and for the city's continued responsiveness to this issue.
Thank you. Right, next, we have Athena Wallen.
Hi, everyone. Athena Wallen, your resident on Brookside Drive. But I want to make it clear that despite me standing up here and mentioning Brookside every time, I'm speaking for citywide changes, and that's part of the conversation that I want you to remember every time I'm up here, that despite me saying I live on Brookside Drive and advocating for my neighbors and myself, I want to see citywide changes. And part of this falls into place with the Brookside parking proposal. About 10 years ago, I sat around a table with a few city councilors and York management, property management folk, and we were discussing the importance about bike lanes on Cameron Street in the Village District. They were not going to put down the bike lanes because it didn't fit the theme of, or the feel of the environment. And I was pleading for the city to acknowledge the importance of multimodal infrastructure around community spaces like grocery stores, libraries, and schools. So you see why I'm here on Brookside Drive, it being a school street, and I'm still arguing the importance of 2 blocks of bike lane. This is an invaluable learning asset. If we have community spaces that pull in all sorts of modalities, all sorts of people from all around our city, we should be looking for infrastructure to support everyone who goes to those places. And it should be something that we put into motion like a blanket slate. We know a diverse usership is going to go to a location. Let's try to plan for the infrastructure around it. This isn't just Brookside, it isn't just the Village District. In District D, there's the Athens High School and the question about where that public library is going to go. And I want to insist that you keep them close together. The school is already a safe zone. We want to expand the area around the school to be safe for all usership. So let's plan to have infrastructure around that school and that library. Again, because we know so many different users, so many different modalities are going to those places. If we have locations that we know infrastructure is going to be concentrated, then maybe we need to consider how to build up that sort of educational space. So if we plan for these things and we acknowledge that there are programs that Raleigh already has, such as Safe Streets for All, Safe Routes to School, NC Vision Zero, all of these things are going into locations like my neighborhood, like Brookside Drive. And this is why I keep coming, because I want that to be the conversation. I'm not a bike person just asking for bike lanes. Thank you.
Thanks. Next, Roy Atride.
Well, it's been about a year, but here we are again. Appreciate the time to talk to you, Mayor and City Council members. I'm here to speak specifically about special item asking for a waiver for the 24-month waiting period for Z5422. It does not meet the materially changed conditions condition for that waiver that would improve acceptability and viability for this project, because the transition zone that is cited actually adds another inconsistency to the policies that this is already inconsistent with. It goes against all four major plans that guide height, density, and planning in this area. Not only the comprehensive plan, but the Capitol Boulevard Corridor Study, as well as the Equitable Transit-Oriented Development Guidebook and the downtown plan itself. Councilmember Mitch Silver has talked many times about the Capitol Boulevard Corridor Study being a key development guiding plan for this area. It designates very specifically 3 stories at neighborhood edge, 12 stories well separated from neighborhoods. The comprehensive plan, 30 stories, as this request would ask for, violates many different comprehensive plan policies, 3 different core definitions, as well as 3 different tables, or 2 different tables, one of which is the main height guiding table, LU2. This area is designated general. The height is restricted to 3 to 12 stories. 30 stories would also violate the approved transition plan or transition area that was given to the neighborhood. Staff very specifically stated that any other rezonings would have a higher bar to come across because that was another policy that it would be inconsistent with. While the area is not currently in a transition zone, I hope it will be soon, because I want that ridership, I want public transportation, I want our city to grow, and I want it to be vibrant. But the Equitable Transit-Oriented Development Guidebook is very clear on transitions from density and height near stations to engage neighborhoods, to engage lower density. It has, and to create graceful transitions, as it's quoted. North Hills is shown as an example of how you can have height and density that doesn't overwhelm a neighborhood, but engages that neighborhood. Last, the downtown plan specifically has illustrations that show 7 to 8 stories in this area. I additionally note that I don't believe it meets the substantially changed rezoning request itself, because it isn't a substantial change. Adding affordable housing, adding money to the affordable housing budget is admirable, but it's a very small part of what their overall plan could be. It doesn't take into account 33% of the additional units should be given for additional height. And this height was already given to the area. It went from 3 to 12 stories back in 2015 without public comment. So I would just ask it to be denied based on it not meeting the requirements.
Thank you. Ben Kuhn. Is Ben here? Okay.
Good afternoon, Ben Kuhn, 1223 Pierce Street. I live on the other side of the railroad tracks, just west of West Street. You heard everything Roy said. I won't really repeat it other than there is no policy basis to bring this back in terms of any material change whatsoever. If you're looking at the $1.2 million that is being offered in a transactional manner to get your vote, they could give that money today. If they really cared about affordable housing as opposed to your vote, they could give it to you today. So I've practiced law here in Raleigh since 1996. I've done land use zoning and real estate work since 2001, 25 years. I've represented developers, I've represented neighborhoods opposed to development. I've gone to the Supreme Court on cases. I was in a deposition this morning. I understand these issues. I've been here as long or longer than many of you. And I really do. And this is one of the cases, Z5422, that made the least sense that I've ever seen as a land use professional being even proposed and letting it get out the gate. It makes no sense from the policies that are in the plan books. You can read them all. We've showed them to you. It talks about tapering and transitioning down towards the well-adjusted neighborhoods surrounding the downtown area to be respectful of them so that you don't overpower that. We are all for, I am all for, good development on this site. It is zoned for 12 stories across 2.6 acres of land. More if you're going to give them a little bit more. 3 acres, make it 3 acres. That is an enormous amount of density. 12 stories over 3 acres is enormous. That was more than your plans called for when this council, well, not this council, the prior council gave them 12 stories when the staff was recommending only 7. And I've seen the transactional nature of things, and it's starting to become difficult. I have clients that have road closing petitions that can't get here. Can't even get to a hearing because staff is saying they don't think it's in the public interest unless they give the city money in exchange for the road closing. I've seen the emails. It's very clear. That is unacceptable. This is unacceptable. It should not be part of a land use decision making by this council. And you've already denied it. There's more than enough policy basis not to allow this waiver request. It militates against it, and you should deny it. I've got nothing. Thank you. Apologies.
Thank you. Rusty Sutton.
Thanks for allowing me to be here. I'm Rusty Sutton, owner of the Green Monkey on 215 South Wilmington Street. Since our opening on September in 2023, downtown has improved, and our customers are seeing it. Unfortunately, the pace of these improvements didn't match the urgency of our situation. I stand before you today to ask you to keep the 2-hour free parking in the city-owned decks. It's not just a program, but it's a lifeline to our small businesses downtown, and it's working. Customers are visiting earlier and staying longer. Your improvements are making a difference, and I appreciate your efforts. However, much work still remains. Let's keep working together to move our downtown forward to a vibrant community hub full of thriving small businesses. Together, we can do it. Please vote yes to make the 2-hour parking permanent. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, and then I think the final person, Joseph Gray, was not here. Is that correct? All right, so that concludes the public comment.
Mayor, before we move to the next item, may I be excused for a moment?
Yep. Right, we also, there was one voicemail public comment which the council received, so. All right, next we have the report and recommendation of the Planning Commission.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, members of council. Bynum Walter, Raleigh Planning and Development. I'm joined by the chairperson of the Planning Commission, Ms. Blaney Miller. Our usual reminder about upcoming holidays. I don't believe any of these actually conflict with meeting dates that are currently scheduled. And then looking ahead to your next meeting on March 4th, there's nothing scheduled for public hearing in the afternoon. There are a handful of items scheduled for public hearing at the evening session, and then nothing scheduled yet on the March 18th meeting, which is what we're suggesting today for the items on the agenda coming out of Planning Commission. There are 4, and I'll just walk through those. The first is on Nowell Road. This is less than an acre. It's going from a residential 4 district to a mixed-use residential district. They're offering frontage and some conditions. Planning Commission had a split vote here. There were some concerns and questions from the commission about height. That RX3 residential mixed-use district would allow 50 feet compared to the 40 feet that are typically allowed in a residential district otherwise. Again, suggest a hearing date of March 18. Another request coming out of Planning Commission for you is also a residential district going to a residential mixed-use district. Again, a split vote from the Planning Commission on this one with suggestions for you to consider height as well as stormwater on this item. The recommendation on the previous item was height only. This is height and stormwater. Again, suggesting a public hearing on March 18. This text change to zoning conditions is on Lewisberry Road. If it feels familiar to some of you, that's because it was rezoned only last year. So this is just at an acre. They're changing the conditions on the case. Planning Commission recommends approval here. So what the applicant is managing is that they have moved into the administrative site review process and discovered an easement that they were unaware of when they made the offer of voluntary zoning conditions to you in the previous request, and so they're asking for some relief from that, suggesting a public hearing date of March 18 here. And then finally, an amendment to the comprehensive plan related to a new segment of South Hall Road. So this would remove a segment. So this is existing South Hall. This is Skycrest. And this would be an extension of South Hall that would connect here between the two. And they are asking to remove that from the plan. Planning Commission recommends denial, 5-1. The vote that did not support denial felt like they had not been provided enough information about impacts of the removal to the network overall. This isn't really so much about the connection between here and here as the bigger picture, and they wanted more information about that. Again, a suggested public hearing date of March 18. What questions could I answer for you, or could Ms. Miller before you schedule a hearing, or would you like for us, information you'd like for us to bring back to the public hearing?
Councilor Silver.
I'd like to ask the question of Councilmember Branch. On the other case on Compassionate, I was told that there may be a desire to move it up to March 4th public hearing because there's an affordable housing component in order to submit that application for consideration. Was that brought to your attention, or are you?
So yeah, the applicant reached out to me. I was going to bring that up after everyone to actually have this one, excuse me, scheduled for March 4th because I also think it's a better fit also for the community because there may be some changes that may need to be made in order to meet any deadline if it's approved. So at the appropriate time, I'll make the motion.
Other questions? Yes, Councilor Patton.
Might be for Blaney. On South Hall Road, what information did the commissioners, like, what information were you desirous to see before you would have felt informed? Or do you think you would have gotten to the same result even in light of some additional information?
Great question.
Just the one member.
It was only one member who said that they wanted additional information, Commissioner Otwell. I will say I was absent for this meeting, so I have been catching up through looking and reviewing our minutes and other staff reports and those kind of things. It's worth noting in the minutes that the commissioners that voted to recommend denial, each of them said that they were genuinely torn on the case and that there were competing factors that they were trying to weigh. And I would recommend taking a look at those minutes to see a broad overview of those other competing factors as well for your consideration.
Other questions? All right, so,
Do you want to go one by one, or?
yeah, if you want to just take them.
Okay. So actually, I'll make a motion that, actually, I'll group items. Rezoning Z3124, text change to conditions TCZ 4124, and a comprehensive plan amendment CP 524 with a recommendation of the public hearing for March the 18th.
Okay. All in favor of that motion? Aye. All opposed, nay. All right.
And I move for rezoning Z4024 for a public hearing of March 4th.
Second, any other discussion? If not, all in favor of the motion? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. All right.
May I just confirm you mean the evening of March 4th? Yes. Thank you very much.
All right. Do we have other motions? Okay. Thank you. Next, we have special items, zoning Z3224.
Good afternoon, Hannah Reckow, Planning and Development. So this case Z3224 was on the report of the Planning Commission at your last meeting on February 4th. You deferred setting the public hearing to allow the conditions to be revised, which the applicant has done. Specifically, condition 1, which lists prohibited uses, has been amended to add vehicle sales and rental and vehicle repair. So should you wish to schedule the public hearing today, suggesting March 4th or March 18th, for context, you have 5 items scheduled for March 4th currently, and you just scheduled 3 for the 18th.
Questions?
Nope, I'll just move to set the public hearing for March 4th as suggested.
Okay, second. Any other discussion? All in favor of the motion? Aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. All right. Okay.
Good afternoon again, Bynum Walter, Planning and Development. As foreshadowed in public comment, you have in front of you this afternoon a request for a waiver of the 24-month waiting period for a rezoning request from 2022. That case was Z5422 at the northeast intersection of West P Street and Northwest Street. You can see that area outlined with a heavy black line here. The request for this was last in front of you on May 2nd of 2023, and so the applicant would be eligible without special waiver to apply for rezoning in early May of this year. So regardless of your action today, they could apply for rezoning very soon. And then just as a reminder, the UDO prohibits staff from accepting new petitions when the property has previously been advertised for public hearing, and then the request is either withdrawn or denied by you all, either by the applicant or by you. And so the UDO lays out a handful of criteria that you may wish to consider in evaluating whether or not you think a waiver is appropriate here. So changed circumstance, some correction to a clerical matter, newly discovered information, or adverse impact, something that could not have been discovered in time for the earlier public hearing, a substantially changed zoning request, or any other circumstance determined by you to be reasonable and in the public interest. This is a legislative decision.
Okay.
Today's request is based on the applicant's justification for the request is the adoption of CP 423, a comprehensive plan amendment, which was brought forward in 2023 and acted on about a year ago. That expanded the downtown transition area And then they are also suggesting a new condition requiring a $1.2 million contribution to the city's affordable housing fund. Those are the two items they noted specifically in their correspondence to you. I will say two things. One, Jason Barron from Morningstar Law is here to answer any questions that you might have of the applicant about their request. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the development agreement with this, which was associated with the earlier zoning request. Kim Bowers is also here and can answer more detailed questions about that. So just a reminder about this request. Some of you were here, some of you weren't. Honestly, I didn't remember all the details of this. I needed a refresher too. So this request last time, this is just over 2.5 acres. The current zoning there is industrial mixed use with a 12-story height limit. The request was for downtown mixed use with a 30-story height limit. They had an urban general frontage offered and as well as some conditions. The request was consistent with a lot of policy, and the Planning Commission recommended approval. And then there, as I mentioned, there wasn't a development agreement in discussion by the same applicant with the city. So there's that site adjacent to future Smoky Hollow Park, a couple of views of the site currently. The conditions that were offered at that time, I do not have information right now about what conditions will be offered. That may be a question you wish to ask the applicant. They had prohibited a handful of uses. They had limited on surface parking between the building and the eastern boundary of the site, so that would be the park side of the site. And they had provided for pedestrian connectivity to the future park. They had also provided for a certain square footage of outdoor amenity area on the site, and then limited their office use to a particular square footage. The development agreement, I'm actually just going to hand to Ken to walk you through this. I think that you would be better served by that.
Thank you.
So I'll give a brief summary, but this was something that was current at the time, and since these terms were negotiated, the city is moving forward with the park as a city project, so I'm not sure how much of this is germane, but this is what was on offer a little less than 2 years ago, which was that the developer would essentially take over the construction of the park. So instead of the city bidding out and doing the construction management, the developer would do that on our behalf. I think part of the intent of that was to be able to manage the construction of the park and the construction of the development as a single unified project that would then be delivered on a single schedule. At the time, there was a budget gap between what was allocated in the bond funds and the full cost of everything that was shown in the park master plan. Developer is going to make a financial contribution to fill that gap. Since that has occurred, the city has won an $8 million grant, and so there is no longer a budget gap in the park to be filled. There is going to be a collaborative process on the park design, mainly since there's so much frontage on the park. There's going to be coordination with the development edge and the park edge, so it would come off as a sort of unified design. The land sale is something that did move forward and is still pending. There's a contract to purchase the property that is still active but has not yet closed. That was for a strip of land on the steep slope of the city property that would be part of the development assemblage. So that was a summary of what was at offer at the time.
Thanks. I have a question for Ken. So you mentioned there was an $8 million grant.
Yes.
Was that with the federal government or with someone else?
Remember, I'll refer that to Stephen Bentley, who's the recipient. I can't remember where it came from.
Good afternoon, Stephen Bentley with Raleigh Parks. It is a federal grant. That is correct. We're working with our national organization to determine whether those grants are still in play. We do not have a contract for the grant. We were only awarded the grant.
Okay, that was my question. Thank you.
I also wanted to just very high level remind you of CP4, Comprehensive Plan Amendment CP 423. Again, it's been a minute, and some of you were not here. So this was a privately initiated request to amend the downtown transitions map, the downtown transitions area, to apply downtown transitions to a 2 additional areas. And I'll talk a little bit about those. So this went through, just like every comprehensive plan amendment, it went through Planning Commission review. It came back to you. You all sent it to committee for discussion. And your final action in February of last year was to act on part of the requested amendment. And so the area shown here in red, which includes the area of the waiver request, was added to the downtown transition area map at that time. And that's one of the changed circumstances that the applicant is referencing for you. So just here's on the far left here is what the map looked like before the amendment. The request was to add not only the area north of Peace Street, but a small area south of Peace Street. The committee recommendation back to the full council was to only add the portion north of Peace Street. And I have this here for reference if we have to go deep again on downtown transition history. So what this amendment did was it added this area, and so it means that there are 1 or 2 additional policies that would be considered in evaluating a request on this site, in addition to all the policies that were already, and that's very well rehearsed in the previous staff report, but it would add some additional policy for considering consistency of the request with the comprehensive plan for any request on any of those sites shown in red, not just the waiver request site.
Bynum, would you speak to what exactly that means? So what kind of condition or, policy is implied here for the downtown transition area?
So the language talks about the transition in height between, in this area, as a sort of an area of transition between downtown and the non-downtown area or the neighborhood, non-central business district area. Just an expectation of a sort of down movement in height across the area.
But no specific height recommendation?
I would not. I don't think so, no. Given all the other policy in the plan, that this policy does not necessarily trump the family of other policies that are relevant here.
Thank you.
Other questions? Yep.
I don't know if you can speak to this. It sounds like the applicant's in the audience, so maybe they can. Has the applicant indicated the reason for the request for the waiver? As you told us at the beginning, they could just go through the process again beginning March 3rd, which is less than 3 months away.
I don't know specifically. I would expect there's some contractual timing issue they're trying to satisfy.
Councilor Silver.
I should have said this at the front end of the conversation. Just for the benefit of my colleagues and those that are listening, I do not have a conflict on this case. I referred the matter to the city attorney. We had this conversation, and she agreed as well that I have no conflict on this case, so I'll be voting on this matter.
We're going to have discussion. Go ahead.
Just piggyback on Councilor Patton, if the applicant is here, is it possible for them to tell us why?
Yep, I think we have from Morningstar Law. Yep.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, members of the council. Jason Barron with Morningstar Law Group here on behalf of the applicant, Raleigh Development Company. Appreciate the opportunity to be before you tonight, or this afternoon rather. Honestly, the reason for the request from a substantive standpoint as it relates to the matters that are included as the basis for the request is the materially changed condition associated with the comprehensive plan. Why do it now? Why not wait? It's a sense of urgency associated with the park master planning that's going on with Smoky Hollow Park. My client is very excited about the opportunity continuing to collaborate and partner with the city related to Smoky Hollow Park. That's going on a daily basis. My client feels like every day that we wait, we're losing an opportunity to really maximize the relationship between this site, which has a shared boundary of 800 feet with the city's future park, with what the city's doing with the park. So that's really the basis. That's why we are here 3 months earlier than we would otherwise be pursuant to the 2-year period that would otherwise apply.
other questions? Counselor Harrison, then Counselor Branch.
Yeah, just a couple questions. So it sounds like you have some intent to work with the city on the park. Does that mean you have an intent to restart that development agreement or in some other capacity?
Yeah, and whether it's a development agreement or, as was mentioned, the city has received a grant, we're certainly interested in participating financially, whether it's through a development agreement or otherwise. There's definitely a spirit of collaboration that will be the hallmark of what this development will be. So I would anticipate, right now there's not a proposed development agreement because we're not in the rezoning process. I would anticipate there would be some proposed development agreement around that concept.
Do you have an expectation of the type of contribution that you're anticipating?
Not at this point, but again, that's a conversation we're looking forward to having.
In the letter about this request, there is mention of the affordable housing contribution of $1.2 million. Is that based on, let's say, the number of units that are built? Is that a certain percentage of the units that's built? How do you imagine that being written in a condition?
Yeah, and again, once we get into the zoning process, we're excited to work that through. Right now, we don't have the details of that condition worked out as of yet, but I would imagine that the condition would include, as you allude to, some sort of trigger related to when that $1.2 million would become due and payable. From a timing standpoint, when that payment would occur, we would anticipate would occur consistent with other cases that the city has seen, and that would be prior to CO of the first unit on the site.
And do you anticipate that the amount is dependent on reaching a certain number of units of construction? So we've had affordable housing contributions in the past where they don't get activated until, let's say, you build 1,000 units.
Right, and at this point, we don't have a hard yes or a hard no on that point. That's a conversation we're interested in having with the city.
Can you tell me, have your heights materially changed? So what you're looking for in terms of heights? Because that was really the main concern that came up in this case before, whether the heights are appropriate for a downtown transition area and, next to certain neighborhoods.
Right, and you mentioned downtown transition area, and I wasn't involved with the case previously. Neither was the downtown transition area involved with the case, and that's why we are here, and that's why we're making this request. At this point, we don't know what our finalized height condition will be. We are interested in working with the community associated with what those heights are, especially as it relates to the downtown transition area that is now applicable to this site specifically. And you make a great point, Councilwoman Harrison. That is why we are here. I mean, I would argue that regardless of anything else that's going on with the site, if you want to talk about a materially changed condition associated with this site specifically, the land use recommendations have applied with respect to this parcel specifically. So we just want the opportunity to have those conversations.
So what I would say, in terms of the downtown transition area being implemented, that it gives even more reason to have that step down in height. And so what was proposed prior, I believe, is what you're still proposing in terms of height. So there's been no material change in height. Is that correct?
At this point, we don't have a proposal before you with respect to height. We are willing to talk about what an appropriate height is.
Okay.
Councilor Branch.
You kind of touched the point I was making, and I wanted to ask about is that engagement in working with the community. Have you done any outreach or anything to date before coming before us?
Not within the last couple of years, not within the last 18 months. Since there was, I believe, and I didn't work on the case previously, there was, I believe, one neighborhood meeting that occurred after the case was decided. Honestly, during that 2-year waiting period, and I think you've probably heard the same from the community, kind of tough to have a meaningful conversation related to what we want to do with the site until we know we've got something to talk about, and that's what we're anxious to do. We are definitely interested in having the type of community outreach that you're talking about and having conversations with the community around what makes sense here.
So basically, just to make it clear for everyone and those watching, you're coming before us to ask for basically permission to start the rezoning process, to engage the community, which will require multiple community meetings before coming back before council with a case for us to vote up or down.
That is, yes, the answer is yes.
Okay.
Councilor Jones.
Thank you for being here. Does this prevent you from having those conversations? Are you not allowed to speak to the neighbors right now?
No, we could certainly have those conversations in advance of the expiration of that 2-year filing period, or refiling period, rather. Again, as I mentioned, there was one meeting that occurred after the case was decided last time. Until that 2-year cooling period is resolved, it makes it kind of tough to have a meaningful conversation, especially with the reapplication or the newly applied downtown transition area. So the policies that with respect to the property have changed. And so I think it just makes it easier to have a meaningful, substantive conversation relative to the case during the zoning process.
Thank you. And then my next question is, Mayor Pro Tem, you mentioned the grant. Is the fear that we possibly won't receive that money? Is that why you brought it up?
I was just curious.
Just curious. Okay. Cool. Thank you.
Okay. Councilor Lambert Melton, did you want to?
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to level set. This case is going to get refiled, whether it is in May, after the 2-year period has lapsed, or tomorrow, if this waiver is granted, it's getting refiled. We're not voting on the case today. And it sounds like you've got some work to do to get the case to a suitable place where it will be approved when it is refiled and comes to the table after a public process. I do think, though, that the implementation of the downtown transition zone did create a change. So I think you've met your threshold for a waiver. I think the waiver gives us some flexibility for you to start having those conversations. I think you've got work to do before you bring this case back to us for a vote. But I do think there is a benefit to having you engage with staff on the park, which is critical. I'm a little worried about our grant funding now too. I don't want to put that in the universe, but it's, it's like the elephant in the room, and the affordable housing aspect. So I would move to grant the waiver.
So I was just going to weigh in. I wasn't here, obviously, when all this went down. This is, I know, one of the more controversial cases from the last administration. To me, I mean, when I was campaigning, this is one of the most strategic pieces of land in the city. I mean, it's on the BRT, the S line. It's right near Smoky Hollow Park, which is pretty incredible. The stream restoration, like major investment by the city. Obviously, northern part of downtown. So this is an incredibly important decision. And I would also be in favor of starting the conversation. Agree, there's a lot to be done. I've already started the conversation with the neighborhood. I mean, I hear from y'all. I know there's, have talked to the attorneys. So I think it would be helpful, given the complexity of this, to start that engagement and see where we get. And I will also say, since I live in one of these historic transition areas, I also understand the precedence and the importance, not just for this site, as important as it is, but for this entire, all of these shaded areas in the city. So I would also be supportive of just starting that conversation. Councilor Patton.
Yeah, you mentioned BRT. I think it's a good mention. For my part, I'm not going to be able to support this waiver. I think it would be appropriate to begin this process again in May when it could begin again, because we're going through the major investment study, and a big bone of contention during the last time we heard this was, will it or won't it be right where the BRT stop is? And I think we'll have more certainty to apply to the conversation later on this year. And so for my part, I'd rather it just begin when it's eligible again.
Yeah, I just want to add, I'm not going to support the waiver at this time. I do appreciate, though, if it does proceed, that you all truly consider the heights and think about how that has an impact on the neighbors. In terms of materially changed conditions, all I see are changes that would say the height should be lower and there should be step downs. And so that's where I can't agree to a waiver, but I understand if it moves forward. I just really hope that y'all will work closely with the neighbors and that council will work closely with the neighbors so that we can find, an opportunity that has resolution for as many, individuals as possible, whether that's folks needing affordable housing, people excited about the park, or people who already live here.
All right, any further discussion? All in favor of the motion, aye. Aye. Nays? Okay, so that is a 5-3 vote. Thank you very much. Okay, the next item is the downtown 2-hour parking pilot. Kenneth Ritchie.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Kenneth Ritchie with Transportation here to provide an update on our downtown parking 2-hour no-charge pilot. Just a little run through of our agenda. So we'll provide a quick overview of the program, of the pilot, and how we arrived at the pilot. And with that overview, a little bit of a level set of where we are with the parking enterprise, especially as it relates to our off-street assets. We'll kind of go through a review of the pilot performance. We will review some of the feedback that we have obtained from the public through our partners at DRA, and then we'll talk about future considerations. So just a little bit of background on our 2-hour no-charge parking pilot. This whole item originates out of the Downtown Economic Development Strategy that was a report put on in joint effort between the City of Raleigh and Downtown Raleigh Alliance as one of those key development opportunities. As part of that, this did initiate, through direction from the council at our October 15th meeting, a pilot of this 2-hour no parking. That pilot initiated on November 15th. It's anticipated to run through February 28th, so for about another 10 days. With that, there's no charge for the first 2 hours in 5 city-owned decks. And on the next slide, we've got a map that kind of highlights those decks. This is active from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., Monday through Friday. The visit is limited to 1 vehicle per day. So if a vehicle enters the deck, if they stay for 15 minutes or they stay for the 2 hours, that is their free time for that particular day. Time parked beyond 2 hours is charged at our posted rates, and this is not available during special events, with special events being categorized as those types of events that really draw 10,000 people or more, and we've got a $10 flat special event rate that applies in those situations. So this is looking at the program eligible parking garages. 5 decks are the municipal deck, our Wilmington Street deck, the Morris Square deck, Blunt Street deck, and the City Center deck. So we've got 4 decks there along Fayetteville Street, and then the municipal deck here behind the building. So looking at the rates, pre-pilot, we had the first 15 minutes have always been at no charge. Beyond that, you would have a charge of $1 for the first hour, for the first 2 hours, and then beyond that, you would have a $2 per hour up to a daily maximum of $14. Under the pilot, there's no charge for the first 2 hours. Then after that, you accrue at $2 per hour up to that $14 max. Again, for the hours, there's no charge after 7 p.m. during the week, and certainly no charge on weekends under our current and under the pre-rates as well as the pilot rates. So as we look at getting into some of the performance, one thing we did want to kind of rectify is looking at where we were pre-pandemic and then looking at where we were in 2024 as we think forward. In 2019, pre-pandemic, our parking revenues were about $13.1 million. Certainly since that time, a number of things have changed in the parking environment. Changes in office workplace. Monthlies have gone down. Certainly during that time, we are seeing a slight increase in that, but certainly we have not recovered to the point we were pre-pandemic. We've seen some hourly changes. Also, in 2019, we had a 5 after 5 program that was initiated in 2016. That helped to cover our custodial contract we have for the decks. That was suspended in 2020. And in 2021, 2022, we did add the small business parking program that has certainly been a supplement to the business community. But based off of, and this is a number I believe was shared during the council retreat, our FY25 estimated shortfall overall is about $2.7 million. Certainly consistent, and an overwhelming majority of our revenues do come from our off-street assets. So a summary of our pilot performance, and this is really looking at our 2 full months of the pilot, so December and January. We have seen an average 28% increase in the number of hourly transactions. With that, with the first 2 hours free, we have seen an average decrease in hourly revenue each month of about $23,000. And this is just a more substantive data set that led to those numbers. This does capture November, December, and January, and compares the 2024, 2025 numbers during the pilot against the comparable months from the previous year, just to provide us that comparable. And as you can see, this does show the increase in our transactions as well as the decrease in our revenues. So looking at pilot feedback, and a lot of kudos goes to our partners at DRA for a lot of the legwork in terms of communication with customers and with the stakeholders in downtown. Through this process, there were a number of surveys that were completed. With that, the community survey had 627 respondents. The storefront survey had 74 respondents. Outreach was through email and social media, as well as there were virtual focus group meetings that were had to solicit feedback from there. There were 3 of those that were held throughout January. Some of the general themes from that feedback: stakeholders were highly supportive of the program and praised the immediate impacts and benefit of the program. Positive retention and attraction tool is some of the words that were brought up. Office brokers and property managers reported that it helped significantly in leasing office space. So certainly I think there was a number of benefits to the downtown community that this pilot has started to show. So as we look a little bit more deeply at some of the numbers from that feedback, looking at increased downtown visitation, with the feedback, 88% of community respondents indicated that the 2 hours of free parking in city-owned decks would increase their likelihood of visiting downtown. Looking at business vitality, 91% of storefronts indicated that the program would have a very positive or somewhat positive impact on the overall health of their business. And program support, 95% of the community respondents and 97% of the storefronts support the pilot program becoming permanent. So a few impact stories that came from those, and you heard from some of these during public comment. The Pointer YMCA did report their best January on record. With leasing, brokers are seeing positive results from existing and prospective tenants. And with events, Visit Raleigh has indicated that this program helps to book events in downtown Raleigh, and really looking at that audience of events that are less than 10,000, I think, is where we've really seen the impact of that. So as we think about that $23,000 a month revenue impact from this program, as we had kind of highlighted during our presentation back in October, we have looked at some considerations for revenue mitigation, really aimed at offsetting the revenue loss from the 2-hour parking. And I've got more details. If we would like to dive into those, we can. A potential of reinstituting the $5 at 5 program on Fridays and Saturdays. We've got reinstituting that same program, but a consideration of Thursdays, Fridays, and Saturdays. We could look at extending paid hours and adding 2 hours onto the end. So instead of cutting at 7 p.m., cutting at 9 p.m., you could extend paid days to include Saturdays. And then the other option would be a consideration of rate increases. So in terms of discussion, what staff would seek is feedback on the pilot and considerations of next steps for the 2-hour parking, and future parking policy discussion, potentially at a work session or within a committee, to really look at the parking enterprise overall. As the parking enterprise is really intent to be a self-sustaining entity, the projected shortfall obviously does create some challenges as it relates to compliance with our enterprise nature, which then ultimately does have impacts on our general fund. But certainly I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Do I have questions for Mr. Ritchie? Counselor Patton.
Kick it off. I looked ahead in the slides. It looks like you've done some analysis of what some of these mitigation options, how much they would offset or
Yes.
not. It might be useful to inform our discussions because it wasn't in the backup memo as we prepared over the weekend. I know you didn't, it looks like not all of them were analyzed, probably waiting on our discussion for further analysis, but it might be fruitful if you run through real quick.
I'm happy to run through those real quick. So this is just some background on the 5 at 5. We won't run through that, but certainly an item that was suspended just prior to COVID. So after modeling the 5 at 5, we would project that revenue to be about $206,000, which doesn't fully offset the projected revenue loss from the program itself based off the averages we've seen over the first couple of months. If we did extend that to Thursdays, Fridays, and Saturdays, does get us pretty close to offsetting. May not fully offset, but does get us closer. Just extending the paid hours only adds about $62,000 of revenue, so it does not offset that or mitigate the revenue impact of the program. Adding Saturdays does increase the potential revenue, but again, does not offset the lost revenue from the program. And then certainly a consideration would be rate increases. We have looked at that tentatively, and certainly we can add back some revenue that would mitigate the 2-hour, but certainly as part of a larger discussion of the overall enterprise, we would have to dive into that a little bit more deeply in one of those other settings.
Thank you. Do you have follow-up? Okay. Counselor Branch.
When's the last time we had a rate increase for parking? 5 years ago? Okay. Yeah, a lot has changed since then. My other question is, how does bringing 5 after 5, even if it's, I'm thinking Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, what's the messaging when we say the first 2 hours are free? Can you help me navigate that?
So I think it does create a little bit of a challenge. I think if we reinstituted the 5 at 5 program, then in terms of the applicability of the 2 hours beyond that 5 o'clock time frame, probably. So then you probably look at the 2-hour free being from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. in that model.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Counselor Jones.
Thank you. In this, with the 5 after 5, if we did that, is there fear that would, because right now it's free after 5, that would hinder people from coming downtown to nighttime activities?
I think certainly there's some concern that has been raised from the community as it relates to that type of impact, yes.
Counselor Lambert Melton.
Yeah, I just want to add some thoughts. They're not questions. Is that okay at this point? I appreciate that we have a fiscal responsibility to be good stewards of the parking fund, but I do think that we're looking at this situation maybe through too narrow of a lens. When we see this type of feedback, more folks coming downtown, business owners telling us they've seen increase in traffic solely because of this program, the YMCA saying they've had their best month, there's got to be some impact on sales tax revenue. More foot traffic and people in our decks in downtown is obviously going to have an impact on public safety, both real and perceived. And so I would be interested in having a more holistic discussion about the positive impacts of this program and other ways that we can either quantify or intangible benefits. I think there's going to be some fiscal quantification we can do on just the sales tax. And I'm interested in seeing after a full calendar year the sort of impact we've had. So I would support keeping this pilot in place through the end of the calendar year, having it come back to us in early 26 to have a discussion about what did we see on sales tax increases, how did it affect public safety, how did it affect economic development. I know we had a discussion at the retreat about potentially divesting of some city-owned decks. Maybe we have a conversation at that time about here's the 5 we've been using for free for 2 hours. Here's a handful that we don't see a great need for. But I'd rather have a holistic conversation and for purposes of this year's budget, finding a way to absorb the revenue loss.
Well, I'll second your
I'll make that a motion.
Okay, motion
So
to-
moved.
I guess, and I would just piggyback on Councilor Lambert Melton. I feel like these decks are some of the most strategic assets in the entire city because they have such an incredible impact on economic development, our tax base, the portal into the city of Raleigh. I also respect that we want things to pay for themselves, but I just feel like we are not capturing all the external benefits and risk of these decks. And yesterday we had the CIP conversation where we talked about the number one criteria that gets weighted above all others is public safety, health, and urgency. I mean, these decks would be, to me, at the top of any list of in terms of the cleanliness and the safety of them. And I would just support continuing this, but then having this much more holistic, broader conversation. We've all heard that the city of Raleigh, right, owns a lot more decks than most other cities. Could we, through some divestment, better manage those shortfalls and have, a more stable forward strategy?
Can I ask for a friendly amendment of actually having the report come back to us in August and possibly go to the Transportation Committee then? The reason I want to say August and not wait into January of next year is we'll be done with this year's fiscal budget. And then we can get ahead of projecting next year's budget for any changes or things of that nature.
I just feel strongly we need a full calendar year of data. And so the program went into effect, I guess, for the holiday season last year. I would prefer to have it through the end of fiscal year, through the end of calendar year 25.
I support the motion, but want to be clear as we come to the end of the year, whenever that report is provided. I know it's a matter of semantics when you say free. It's really subsidized. It's costing something. So for the public, it's free, but it's actually costing. And so I think to extend it to the end of the year, take a deep look. I don't know when is the right time to do it, whether it's August or the end of the year, but we need to have enough time to make a decision because at that point, we'll be looking to extend it a few more months while the study is underway. So just want some recommendations in queue for us to debate it. That's my concern is if we say the end of this year, then we're looking at the first quarter, at least of the year, to determine what's been the impact, what do we do. So I just want to make sure we are fiscally responsible. We're offering a subsidy to help downtown businesses, but Councilmember Lambert Melton, you made very good points about sales tax and other tangible benefits that are coming from this program. So I'll support the motion, but I'd look for some type of report before the end of the year. Don't know what the timing is, so we can start January with some real concrete evidence. Otherwise, or at least some benefits. Otherwise, we'll be looking to do another 2-month extension or a 3-month extension until we decide what new program to put in place. But I will support the motion.
Councilor Patton.
Back to you for just a sec. And then I do have some comments. But early in the slide, I think slide 6, you show revenues from 2019 to 2024. And at the bottom of the slide, it says the estimated FY25 shortfall is $2.7 million. So that's money that will be subsidized from the general fund if we don't account for it elsewhere, right? Yeah. And so my question is, the $2.7 million shortfall includes the $240,000 of estimated lost revenue, or would, if we continue the program, our estimated shortfall is actually closer to $3 million? Does that question make sense?
I do not know, and I don't know if Sadia or I'm gonna call a friend here to.
That's all right.
Yeah.
No, so I'm happy. So good afternoon, Sadia Sattar from Budget and Management Services. So Councilmember Patton, the number that you see, the 2.7 million, is actually what we have in the budget at present. We did subsidize parking. As our friends mentioned, this is something that should be able to sustain itself, but unfortunately we haven't been doing so due to COVID and other impacts. We are currently in conversations with our friends in transportation to figure out what the impact of this 2-hour pilot will be to the 26 budget. Again, it is a little early. The pilot, of course, will end at the end of the month, but we are in really close, conversations with transportation to figure out that 240, what that impact would be. I do not have a definitive answer for you, but of course, staff can definitely come back, and we will come back as we produce the budget to kind of share some further impacts.
Okay. And I guess one less for y'all, back to the table. What I wonder if the body would be interested in, one thing we didn't hear about is rate increase, the potential impacts of rate increases. My gut tells me that of all the mitigation strategies provided, a rate increase on the hours after 2 is going to be the most palatable to the public and the easiest to communicate. But we don't know how big those rate increases would need to be to provide the necessary revenue. I'd be happy to take this into Transportation Committee and make a determination about what's happening for the program today, but take into Transportation Committee even right now or next month to discuss that component and have further discussion on which of these mitigation options would be most palatable to the public, just for consideration.
Okay, Mayor Pro Tem Fort.
One thing I will say is I know that we have festival season that will end September-ish, October, so you get through Hopscotch, Boogaloo, all that stuff downtown. So maybe getting the data back, kind of splitting the difference between you and Councilmember Branch, October-ish, would still give us an opportunity to weigh in before the end of the year, because you had the data from this last holiday season, but we would have gotten through a number of our bigger weekends. And so if you bring us something back in October, that still gives us a little time to kind of negotiate and look at the data.
I'll just add, as long as the vote is to keep the pilot in effect through the end of the calendar year, I care a little less about when we get the data. What I'm worried about is that's about to be the holiday season, and if we signal at all to the public or the business owners that the program is at risk right before the holiday season, that's probably the worst possible time to create that sort of headache. And so as long as it's clear that the pilot is staying in effect through calendar year 25, we could have a discussion on some of the data at any time. I'm fine with October, I'm fine with August, whenever staff feels it's appropriate. So I guess I'll accept it. I guess I'll modify my motion that we'll keep the pilot in place through calendar year 2025 to have a more holistic discussion, and staff can bring us data in pieces or in whole or in part whenever you feel it's ready, sometime in the fall. I just also wanted to anecdotally add, since I have the mic right now, is this is a much bigger problem than this 2-hour pilot. I mean, we're talking about a $2.7 million deficit. This is $240,000. We need a long-term strategy on our parking fund and decks and whether we want to be in the parking business. But this program itself, which is a drop in the bucket compared to the overall conversation we're having, has done a lot of good. I think there was I think it was our social district where Bill King or Downtown Raleigh Alliance had said it was more popular than the tree lighting. Maybe that's what it was. This has got to be pretty close to that, the 91% and 88%. And so I definitely want to keep it in through the end of the year and then have the conversation about the data when we have it. So I'm fine with that being the motion on the table.
I think Council.
It's now moot.
Okay. Any other discussion about parking? Not all in favor of the motion, aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. All right, so that's unanimous. Thank
you all.
you. All right, we now have the report and recommendation of the city manager.
Yes, good afternoon, Mayor and Council. We have one formal item on the agenda today, but we have a special guest who's bringing a gift, and I'll have an announcement after the formal item. So we will start it off with someone who is no stranger to us, Ruffin Lewis Hall, is here as the new president, and if you know, you know. As the new president and CEO of the Dix Park Conservancy, and he has a gift to bear.
Thank you, Madam City Manager. I won't respond to that. I think we all know the problems when you know somebody for 20 years, got lots of stories. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. My name is Ruffin Hall. I'm the new president and CEO of the Dix Park Conservancy. I want to take a moment to send regards from our board chair, Bill Ross. He's actually traveling today. We also have our vice chair, Nancy McFarland, and at least one board member here, Ann Franklin, in the back. Did I miss? Is another board member here that didn't tell me? Okay. So, but they're all watching closely online. So, it's a little weird to be talking at this particular podium. I've never actually done that, so I appreciate it. Let me just say really quickly, I just want to say thank you to each and every one of you for your service. We all know what that really feels like, but you really don't know what it feels like until you've been up at the table. So thank you for your service in all regards. What I wanted to really do today was talk about some pretty exciting things that are going on with the park before we move into the 10-year plan. We have really 3 priorities at the Dix Park Conservancy: partnership, fundraising, and engagement. And part of my job is to do at least half as good a job as my predecessor, to make sure that we continue all the good work. I don't think I'll get to that standard, but I will certainly try. And so that partnership really starts with our #1 partner, which is the City of Raleigh. And we all know the trap of saying too many names and getting in trouble and forgetting some. So let me just say thank you to this mayor and council. Thank you to the mayor and council members since 2015 that led the acquisition. Some of the folks are the same players in the room. Not only the staff at the city, but the Dix Park Conservancy Board and all their members and the Dix Park Conservancy staff. I do want to say a special moment to say thank you for the working relationship with City Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Resources, Stephen Bentley, Adam Foreman, and of course, Kate Pierce. We really, really appreciate that strong working relationship, and it makes a difference every single day. The other part of that priority that I mentioned has to do with fundraising. And so one of the things coming up very soon, there's lots of great things happening at Dix Park, too many to mention here, but one of the big ones is the upcoming opening of the Gibson Play Plaza. And this partnership with the Conservancy and the city is making a big difference. It makes a difference to get things done like the Gibson Play Plaza. And under the category of fundraising, what I have today is our next payment. And so the Conservancy has made a commitment of $26.3 million towards that project. Look in early May, and then for some other folks like yourself, there'll be some events in April to be on the lookout for some invitations to celebrate that moment. Of that $26.3 million, we've already paid $16.8 million. And so there's another $3 million commitment that I'd like to give you today. Now, this is a check for $3 million from the Conservancy to the City of Raleigh. Now, most of the time, and this is from my experience, we do a ceremonial big check, right? But the thing about this particular check is that it's actually the real check.
You can take
So
it
this,
to the bank.
it may be small, but this is mighty. So the other thing about not having a ceremonial big check is because this is an ongoing partnership. We have additional payments to make, we have additional commitments to make, we have additional things to work on together, and I'm just really excited to continue that partnership and continue to work with the city. So I'm going to go give this real check to our city manager and ask Kate Pierce to come up and talk about the 10-year plan.
Thank you. And thank you, Mayor McFarland, for making all this happen as well.
Thank you. Kate Pierce with Raleigh Parks here to talk a little bit about the Dix Park 10-year implementation plan and where we're headed over the next 10 years. So just a quick background information for those of you that are new to the table or new to the park partnership and the process to develop the 10-year plan. Since 2016, the city and Conservancy have been working together to guide the future of Dix Park, and we've accomplished a lot. From our first event, Destination Dix, on the hottest day of the year in 2025, to the adoption of the Dix Park Master Plan, and most recently, the opening of the Stone Houses Visitor Center and various art projects. We've accomplished a lot together as a partnership. And 2025 is a hallmark year for us. One, it marks the 10-year anniversary of the purchase of the property from the state of North Carolina. 2, it is the opening of our first major project from the Dix Park Master Plan, the Gibson Play Plaza. And then there are a number of other things coming across the year, including something that I think the community is really excited about, a troll build in the fall of this year. So lots to look forward to in 2025, but really, what are our next set of priorities between the city and the Conservancy to move forward the council-adopted master plan and the recommendations of all the subsequent plans and studies? Most recently, we finished the cultural interpretation plan, which really took a look at the long history of the site, had a lot of engagement with various descendant groups to how we recognize and honor the history of the site to future park visitors. All of the plans to date are rooted in community engagement, and so the 10-year plan doesn't really change the ideas that came from the community. It provides a roadmap about how we advance those priorities. So the master plan and subsequent studies tell us what to do. The 10-year plan tells us how can we do it, when should those projects happen, who should lead those efforts, and how will those be funded. And it really is a conversation between the city and the Conservancy and a consensus building process that recommends a new schedule of projects, plans, and studies to implement those community projects. And more importantly, it's the strategies around capacity, funding, role and responsibility, governance between the Conservancy and the city to realize all of the projects that were developed from community engagement in the master plan and the subsequent studies. So the 10-year plan is our roadmap on how to get things done. And we're here today to provide some high-level recommendations on that and then seek your approval to come back at a future meeting with much more specifics. So the key recommendations. One is to update our project phasing based on things that have occurred since adoption of the master plan. So DHHS has shifted their move-out timeline. That has significant impacts on how we develop the park. We have better understanding from subsequent plans and studies with more information. So for example, the Rocky Branch feasibility study gives us a lot more information on how we can actually advance that project. And we're talking a lot about funding availability and constraints and how do we continue to implement projects given the different and changing nature of funding. In addition to project phasing, we really do want to take a hard look at our funding strategy and what are those funding tools that will support long-term park development. So we ask to establish a task force that looks at a variety of tools, including value capture mechanisms like tax increment financing or tax increment grants. This would all come back to council for review and approval, but we want to start that work in earnest so that we can develop a long-term funding strategy to support park development and operations. In addition, one thing that's keeping me up at night is thinking about the state's transition from the Dix campus to their new headquarters on Blue Ridge Road. Their lease currently terminates January of 2027, and we have a lot of work to do to get ready for the city to be responsible for all of that new real estate, all 308 acres, legacy infrastructure systems, and all the costs associated with that. So working together with our partners in Planning and Development Services, we've looked at a variety of scopes of work, including the DHHS transition plan, looking at early demolition, abatement, and landscape stabilization, potentially a zoning update. How are we going to decommission existing infrastructure and rebuild new infrastructure to support park development? And what are we going to do with all of those old buildings that we choose or may not choose to save on the campus? All of this work has associated costs and has associated responsibilities tied to that. So we do want to initiate an adaptive reuse and redevelopment strategy that would be funded jointly by the city and Conservancy. The contract would actually be managed by the Conservancy, but the work would be overseen by the Dix Park Leadership Committee and then ultimately come to this table for review and approval. And finally, I think one of the big ones is governance. So we've had an MOU that then turned into an MOA, and I think it's time again to look at our partnership agreement between the city and the Conservancy to think about the roles and responsibilities between two organizations, who's best prepared to do what, to relook at the composition of the leadership committee and the community committee to make sure that we are both engaging the public in the right way at the community level and have the right leadership around the table to make the decisions, and potentially to think about a master plan amendment process that starts to incorporate all the subsequent plans and studies that we have done to date. So those are our high-level recommendations for you. These recommendations were unanimously approved by the Leadership Committee. So our recommendation to you today is to adopt the 10-year implementation plan, but to direct staff to return to a future council work session with specific recommendations on building-related work, funding, and governance.
Thank you for that very informative report, Kate Pierce, and I know there will be many questions. I'll start with Councilor Silver. Yes.
Well, first, Ruffin, congratulations. We had our meet and greet the other day, so it's good to see you on the other side of the podium. And Kate, thank you for what you do, and thank you for who you are. We certainly appreciate your contributions. I've been honored by the mayor to be on the leadership committee as well as liaison to Dix Park, so it's my pleasure. And it was refreshing to see this plan. I do, if you can go back to the long-term funding slide, just have one recommendation. In terms of this task force, it says to explore and assess a variety of funding mechanisms, including but not limited to.
Yes.
For a very long time, I'm just going to have to put my New York City Parks Commissioner hat on for a second, to really explore concessions. When I mean concessions, it's not a one-time vendor at an event, but a concession that you can look at some of these buildings to form public-private partnerships that is owned by the city but actually provides a use. By way of an example, when I was in New York City, we had over 400 concessions that generated $64 million annually that got reinvested back in the park. Nothing from taxpayer money. Primarily, these were all specific uses. By way of an example, ice skating rinks, tennis courts, and I can go on and on. It provided a benefit in the park owned by the city. It was built by the private sector, and we got a lot of our restrooms at no cost that these individuals had to own and maintain. And because it was a term, 10, 20 years, it wasn't a private use, it was still owned by the city. I would just encourage both the city and the Conservancy to put that as an option to explore. Each state is different. There is some public-private legislation in the state statutes that I think could be beneficial to get some of these projects done quicker at zero to no cost to taxpayers. So I think this is certainly an asset with all those buildings on site. Particularly your last slide talked about the group looking at reuse and adaptive use of some of the buildings. Just want to make sure there's that bullet on there as well under long-term strategies. I think that could be beneficial not only to the city but the entire region because this is a regional destination. But thank you for the presentation. I enjoyed it. And hello, Mayor. Oh, good to see you as well.
All right, Councilor Jones.
Thank you so much for being here. I have a few questions. Can you go back to the slide where yeah, that one.
Okay.
You read my mind. Thank you. The 14 to 18 million estimated annual operating costs that will start in 2027?
Yes. So that is the cost to operate and maintain all of the existing buildings
without anything being
without
done.
any demolition. So we're trying to get ahead of that to reduce that operating cost.
And that's what this governance task force is going to be charged with, figuring out these funding mitigations.
Yes.
So since we purchased the property in 2015, was it always anticipated to wait until 2 years before we retain that ownership to have this discussion? Or what was the plan?
Yeah, so originally the state was supposed to vacate the property this July. And so with the state's extension of the lease to January of 2027, it gave us a little bit more time to think about, because a lot of the costs and a lot of the potential revenue is associated with the buildings. And until we actually had a solid timeline on when those buildings would transition, it was a little bit premature to get into kind of the conversations about what the adaptive reuse could be, because we couldn't tell a partner, hey, do you want to use this building, but we not have access to it until January of 27, if that makes sense.
Okay, and then so this governance committee, who is part of it and who chooses those members?
Yep, so what we would do is we would look to the city manager and to the president of the Conservancy to recommend folks to support those task forces. The governance, both of the groups were, so two levels. One is we're thinking that those members should be part of the leadership committee table, but that's something we can bring back to the manager and to the CEO of the Conservancy. But the idea was that it would be a subset of the leadership committee that would be on those task forces, supported by staff working groups. If there is direction from this table to consider other members, we could definitely do that.
Can you help me understand why not just the leadership committee doing it? Help me understand what the governance committee is.
Yeah, it's just a lot of meetings it would kind of be like a transportation subcommittee or a growth and natural resources subcommittee. Let's get a working group together that can bring some recommendations to the larger body.
Understood. I'm trying to see if I had any more questions. Not at this moment. I'll stop.
Councilor Harrison.
Yeah, thanks for all these updates. I was just looking at the plan here, and it has, immediate needs, things we're working on right now, like Gibson Play Plaza. It goes out to 1 to 2 year projects, 3 to 5 years, 6 to 10 year, 10+ years. And I know some of these are very big ticket items, and so I'm curious, is it clear somewhere where the dollar amounts are? Could that be added? Maybe just like a little $1 means, $1 million,
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
We plan to bring all of that back to you at a spring work session. We do have price ranges already associated with each of those phases. They are large numbers, so we wanted to find some time with y'all prior to run through all of that and then bring it to a work session for conversation. But yes, we can add that.
And I'm curious, the order that they show up, the bullet points, are those prioritized, or do you have any sense yet from like the leadership committee, for example, on that?
We are very confident in the immediate and the 1 to 2 years. We are less confident as the time pushes forward. So a lot of it is going to be funding dependent, and then prioritization with funding available for those later projects. But everything kind of in the 1 to 2 year and immediate categories are fully funded. A lot of it really is funding dependent, and then we can prioritize once we know what our funding streams are.
And when does council have an opportunity to weigh in about, again, where those priorities might be, especially for big ticket items?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. We can, when we come back to the spring work session, we can talk bigger picture about what some of those major milestones are. So for example, the work to redevelop the ridge, that's very associated with all the building related information that would come back to council for contract amendments, budget amendments, real estate transaction leases. So there's multiple touch points for council on the back end, but we can definitely think about how to front end that so you're influencing how these projects move forward as well. There's a lot of just realities though that none of us have control over, timing of leases, or timing of the state's lease, funding realities. And so we're trying to create a framework that gives us the best tools to move forward efficiently and effectively, but at the same time, we can have a prioritization conversation.
I think something else I'm looking for, and it's probably in here to some extent, are low-cost activations. Yes. So, like the land bridge, that is very high cost, very cool, but that will be a hard one to get to. Now you have in the 3 to 5 year mark a community garden. That to me is something that could be implemented in the near term for low cost. I think I've already mentioned a Ruffin. I'd like to see chickens, alpacas, llamas, maybe a hippo, whatever you want to do, but just something that is going to bring people to a space and interact with the environment in, I think, a unique way. And again, hippo, maybe not, but just things that are a little bit easier to implement and again, get people really understanding, their connection to the environment. I think that is always something that is a struggle, for people who maybe haven't had that access growing up.
We can definitely do that. And if you have the plan document pulled up, if you look to I'm not going to be able to pull the page number from my head, but right after the series of maps, there's a list of projects that can move forward as quickly as funding is made available. And those are the less expensive projects that might also have great community benefit. And I believe the community gardens is listed there. But those are projects that don't require huge sums, but can move forward and have a positive impact.
Yes, Councilor Patton.
Hi, Kate. Hi. I just from like a bureaucracy standpoint, I feel like a lot of times when the topic of digs comes before us, we're like approving a study, or this time we're approving a task force, but there's also the leadership committee and the community committee and the parks board and this and that. There's like a lot of churn just around, like at this very high level of like orchestrating the park, and we're not always, perhaps it just hasn't happened during my time on the council to talk directly of the doing. Do you think that this governance task force is going to sort of move us in a direction where there's a little less like churn and motion, and like it feels sometimes like the work is duplicative across these different groups?
Yeah, I think, this is the conversation that's going to need to happen at this table, is what does the council want the council's role to be in the future of Dix Park? What does the council want to delegate to other organizations or other committees like the leadership committee or the community committee? And I think we will probably make some suggestions around all of that to help clean up, because we have the community committee, the leadership committee. We also, even though we go to Parks Board, even though they don't have a voting voice here, and then we also come to this table. So I think there's some efficiencies to be found, but we'll look to this table for guidance on how to best structure governance and also how to move the project along at a more efficient pace.
And I just want to piggyback onto Councilor Patton's point. At least for the last 2 years, it's felt very directed. Like I don't feel like council, at least from my view, has had that say. We've been told things, and then you come back and tell us things. So as we develop this governance task force, I would be very interested in having our council representatives on there, so that now I understand that's our job. How do we make sure that information transitions? Because it hasn't been. Yeah. It just hasn't. Right. And so I want to make sure that there is clearer ways for us to have that knowledge and a place to also input thoughts in, because it's felt very not that way so far.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We can do that.
I can make a comment. Yeah, I am the liaison, both on the leadership committee. Both Mayor McFarland and Ruffin will have to hold me back on all the things I want to say after running about 2,000 parks. So certainly I hear what you're saying, and we'll have those conversations, not just me, along with the leadership committee, about providing more certainty. The master plan is more of a, if it's not fully funded, you have a master plan. And the question is, typically it's fully funded, so it's just phasing it to get it built. We're kind of building as we go, as we get the funding sources, so you kind of have the master planning process. Then you have the programming, which is what's ongoing, and then you have maintenance. So they kind of fall into these different tranches. And so maybe as I come back to communicate to council members, if we show them kind of the long-term planning in terms of the master plan, and then the fundraising, then there's the programming, then there's the maintenance. But then there's another big issue, is that what do you do with all the buildings? And there's also a strategy about the adaptive reuse, which I'm not sure it's in the master plan. So if it helps, as I come back, it's up to all of you, either individually or collectively. I can just report back on what I'm hearing, but also being a member of the leadership team, offer my advice and guidance as one of many voices. So I'll certainly play that role if this council desires me to do that.
Madam Mayor, just briefly, when I thank you, Councilman Silver. I think from what I've seen over the years, everything you mentioned has been done. I think the last couple years, everything shifted to get Gibson built. And so it centered around Gibson, it centered around Lake Wheeler Road, the work we're doing there. So it was more project oriented, I think, over the last couple years. But I think it is time to probably do another reset. All the things you mentioned, just bringing it back to this current council, because I was sitting here, I'm the only one that's left that went through everything else that you just mentioned. So, great points.
And that is precisely why I recommended that we do a work session in the spring, so that everybody can be brought up to speed and have more clarity around what currently is the expectation of the Conservancy, as well as the city as the owner of the property. So it will be a full 2-hour work session. So get ready.
Yep. Well, and I think Kate's done a great job today answering all these questions. I would just say this is all very helpful to know it might be like, what are council decisions that are coming up in the next year? You know, is it about governance? Is it about the demolition program? Just if you can really spell that out for our work session. I understand the confusion because this is a sprawling, complex, so how we can sort of break that down and make it easier, but appreciate your. I also, just as disclosure, we already had one ethical disclosure today. I will say that I was not involved in any of this work for the 10-year plan. They shut me out of the room, and so I have actually not seen this until we all saw it. So just to say, there is, I was not part of something that we will then ultimately vote on. All right, so we don't have a vote today. All of this will come back to council. Oh,
Yeah, we do.
Oh,
Adopt.
we are adopted, okay.
Yeah.
Move for adoption.
Amendment, please. If you can include on the long-term strategy, whether we call it public-private partnerships, concessions, I think that would be helpful to make sure that's, it says, but not limited to. I'd prefer it to be more clear and explicit, so there is a thoughtful conversation about that, if you'll accept that as a friendly amendment.
Yeah. Okay, any other discussion? If not, all in favor of adopting this, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay, and it is a unanimous vote.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. And two quick announcements. One, I am happy to announce that last night, Officer Gillick, and you all will recall, Officer Gillick was the officer involved in the situation at Renaissance Park last month, was stepped down from the ICU unit last night to a non-emergency room. So thankful for all the prayers and all of the visits and gifts from the community and the well wishes, and the next stop will be home. He still has a long road to recovery, but it is good to hear that he is stepping down. And lastly, as the snow is coming upon us tomorrow, staff is working to make sure that if there are any operational impacts, we will follow our normal lines of communication. I will communicate with council. We will communicate through our communication platforms, so that the public will be made aware of any changes to operations, and we're working on those schedules right now. So hopefully it holds true and we only get 1 to 3 as opposed to the 6 to 9 that they originally said. And let's just say our mayor has a whole lot of work to do, so she cannot be sledding over there at Dick's this go round, because we need her here next week for some things. But staff is working to be prepared, and we'll start the brining process today to make sure, in addition to what NCDOT is doing, that our streets are safe and passable for those folks who have to get out and drive. And that concludes my report today.
If the mayor is sledding at Dick's, can we get a picture? Mayor McFarland or Mr. Hall, thank you.
That works too.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, and very good news about Officer Gillick. Okay, so next we have the matters for public hearing. Sure. First, we have Mr. Abernathy from Housing and Neighborhoods.
Good afternoon, Mayor, City Council. I do have 2 public nuisance abatements that were completed that are on this list. The first here is 1503 Beauty. This property just had trash bottles kind of all over the place. We did tap Acorns to go out and kind of do an assessment, and their assessment that nobody was living there. It was just kind of being used as a hangout, so to speak. No contact with the owner after we sent out notices, no phone conversations or anything like that. So that resulted in the nuisance abatement. Second one was 1009 Seabrook Road. The grass was encroaching into the sidewalk and the street, and probably knee-high or thigh-high in some places. There was no conversation with the ownership about that after we sent out notices, and that resulted in the nuisance abatement.
Madam Mayor?
Yep.
My understanding on the second one, that one's been paid. I just texted the owner. When I saw it on the agenda, I reached out to him. I think we had a Rocky Mount address, but he's actually here on the background. I showed him a Rocky Mount address.
Okay.
And he's actually here in Raleigh as well.
Okay.
So I reached out to him, and I just texted him. He said he paid it.
Okay.
So if we can just get that verified by the clerk's office or finance before. Because I was told it was paid today.
We can check that, and I guess.
Okay,
if
so we
it
just
isn't-
hold it?
Yeah, we can hold it.
Okay.
That's my best. We can hold it. So if there's any questions about these two, I'd be more than happy to answer.
Do either of them have previous liens for other?
No.
Okay. So move to adopt.
You have to do the hearing.
All right, so open the hearing on, should I just read so it would be 1503 Beauty Avenue? Let's do it solo. All right. And then there's no one here, so close the hearing.
Move for approval.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right. And then we're just going to hold the next one?
Yeah, I say just hold this one, then staff, if all else fails, we'll do it at the next meeting. But I literally texted him and he said he's paid it. Madam Attorney, what do we need to do?
Well, it was slated for public hearing,
So you
so
have
my
to open it.
Still have the
recommendation would be
hearing.
to.
Open the hearing. Okay.
Right, and take
Close.
no action.
Okay.
And we can find out, we should be able, over the course of the rest of the day, find out whether it's actually been paid so that you guys can take action today.
Okay. So I'm going to open the hearing on 10009 Seabrook Road and close it.
And I just,
Or just leave it open? All right, once again, we're gonna, okay, we're now leaving it open.
Yes.
All right, moving on to the next item, also Mr. Abernathy.
Yes, 617 South Blunt Street. This property is a rental property. It has a pretty colorful history to it. It caught on fire in August of 2023. The way that works is the fire department goes out and the report is generated, and then development services goes out right after that and evaluates the property for what permits are needed for repair. That was done right after the fire in August of 23. We usually, in the way it comes to housing and neighborhoods code enforcement, is if there's nothing done over a certain amount of period, we give them time to do insurance claims and pull permits and kind of start repairs and that kind of stuff. If there's nothing that's done, we start on our case with it. In November of 2023, we started a housing case and notified the owner that all those permits were needed to bring that house back into compliance. The owner did go and apply for a building permit only. Again, development services required building, electrical, mechanical, and plumbing to make the repairs. That was immediately kicked back to him, and they haven't done anything since. We have talked to the property owner. We met him on site. I met him on site in November and urged him, hey, go pull your permits, go, start the work on this, and he has not done so. This property does fall into the Prince Hall Overlay District, Historic District, and we talked with planning about the possibility of, reaching out to the ownership to see if they'd be willing to maybe sell it, and we could, in a way to keep that structure alive in the Historic District. That phone call went kind of unanswered. Again, we met in November and urged that property owner to, take some action, and that has not occurred. Kind of what you see from the pictures, we've got some pretty severe structural damage to the house. It's in various states of being open. We've had folks getting inside, and we'll go back over there and kind of secure the front door and that kind of stuff. But it's right near the sidewalk, so there is an element of unsafe for pedestrians walking by. As you can see, the fire damage was pretty extensive. He actually made the repairs to the house next to it. And it's a duplex. Majority of the damage was on the right side of the duplex. And as you can see, it was completely gutted after the fire. So if you have any further questions, I am asking you to adopt a demolition ordinance. And we would move forward with that process.
Question.
Yep, go ahead.
our Raleigh Historic Division or Preserve Raleigh, have either one of them groups, are they aware of this?
Yes.
And have reached out and they're not interested in helping preserve?
We had a lot of communication up front with planning, the historic folks in that group, and that we checked all those boxes.
Okay.
Are there any other liens on the property from other abatements?
No.
Okay. And are their property taxes up to date, do you know?
I'm assuming they are without looking at them, but I can't confirm that right now.
I would say I probably have a little bit of hesitancy just based on the location of the property, and can imagine that there may be community folks who are not aware. So I don't know that I necessarily want to take action on it today without having some conversations with some community folks to see if there's some interest in trying to do something different before we agree to demolish it. Is just my thought.
Like a 2-week hold?
Something along those lines, just to reach out to some folks and say, do y'all want to try to contact the owner, try to do something to preserve it before it gets demolished, just because of where it's located. I don't know that we should do anything with it until we at least try to have some conversations with some folks.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. That's why I asked about those two groups. But I'm definitely willing to hold this one for 2 weeks.
Okay, so should I open a hearing or just?
Open it. I say open it and hold it open.
Keep it open, all right. Okay, so I'm opening the hearing on 617 South Blunt Street, and we will
Bring it back
see if.
March 4th.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, what was the date?
March 4th,
2 weeks.
during the day.
And just so I'm clear, is that something you're wanting code enforcement staff to reach out to? Okay, okay. Okay, thank you.
All right, the next, the city clerk, Tax Equity and Fiscal Responsibility Act of 1982, Lindenwood Education System.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. This request to hold this public hearing was received. It wasn't abundantly clear what member of staff should handle presenting the item. I guess I drew the short straw, so bear with me. I'm going to try to set this up for you guys. Basically, we have a out-of-state corporation looking to acquire the educational resources of another company. In order to do so, they're going to utilize the financing tool of tax-exempt bonds, which will be issued by a government agency in the state of Wisconsin. The IRS, or the Internal Revenue Service regulations, do require that a public body hold a hearing due to the fact that tax-exempt bonds are going to be used in this financing. So I would point out no one has signed up to speak either in support or in opposition. So you may just wish to open the hearing. If council has any specific questions about the details of the deal, we do have an attorney who's here in Raleigh representing the parties involved. Happy to answer any questions before you open the hearing.
Any questions? Yep, Councilor Patton.
Less for you, Lou. It seems like this is not our debt. This is not the taxpayers' money. This is sort of a weird one-off because the Miller-Mott College that they're acquiring happens to be located in the Raleigh city limits. But you said like an applicant, not an applicant, but someone associated with this transaction is in the audience? Is that what you
Yes,
said?
Ms. McGee is here from Parker Poe, representing the borrower.
Perfect, thank you. I just have a couple questions, and maybe you can speak to them. As I was looking up Miller-Mott College in preparation for this, they're a for-profit career and technical education facility. We have a stunning community college system here in Wake County with Wake Tech. I was noticing that on the U.S. Department of Education College Scoreboard, Miller-Mott College currently only has a graduation rate of 49%. Less than half of attendees graduate, and only about half of them return for a second year. Can you speak to a turnaround plan?
I cannot speak to the turnaround plan. I know that they plan to continue the same educational opportunities at the location in Raleigh. This is a part of a larger bond financing to acquire educational assets across the country. It's $175 million of 501c3 tax-exempt bonds that will be issued in Wisconsin. And like you mentioned, it is no debt of the city of Raleigh. This is just a requirement through the Internal Revenue Code to host a public hearing due to the fact that a portion of the proceeds will be used on a project located in Raleigh.
Okay. Did you have any questions? No. Okay. All right, so I will open the hearing on the Linden Education System educational asset acquisition. I'm not quite sure how to title all this, but all right. And then close the hearing.
And so there is a associated resolution that you would want to consider adopting.
Okay. Does anybody want to pull up the resolution and make a motion?
I don't want to put up a resolution. I'll be honest with you, I am struggling with this one. I don't want to, I'm not saying it's a blank check, but I just feel, I appreciate Councilmember Patton's due diligence. You know, usually you have a staff report. I just can't put this in context. I understand why they're doing what they're doing, but I don't know implications of saying yes. I don't know implications of saying no. And so I don't know if we can hold this. Whose responsibility is it to get more information? You know, we have 2 resolutions in the packet. I'm just personally struggling with feeling as if I don't want to vote on something if I don't feel I have information to make a decision. I just don't know what I'm saying yes to.
You know, this reminds me of, we used to have to sign off on people wanting to be notary publics, and they used to come to the city council, and we'd have no idea who these people were, but somehow it was our obligation to have to sign this document. And I feel like this is sort of equally a junk law that forces a bunch of counselors who have no idea what this is. So, I mean, to some extent, I kind of agree with all of you. Like, why should we waste the citizens' time or the city's time on something that has nothing to do with us, right?
I think that's fair and accurate. I think the purpose of the hearing, if we were to imply what the statute or the regulation, is to receive public input. You've received none.
Yeah. What if we just choose not to make the hearing, and then people will never come back to the Raleigh City Council for these things again?
I mean, well, the county said no.
Right. I mean, they could go to another body, right?
Didn't the county refuse to do it?
As far as the venue for conducting the hearing is, we actually, when we received this request, we did reach out to Wake County, suggested that because it was an educational matter, that it would be more appropriate for Wake County. They have a informal rule of thumb, I think I would describe it as. If the project is located in a municipality, then that municipality should conduct the public hearing to receive any public input.
Well, may I suggest that our city attorney reach out to the county attorney and they sort of work out some plan for this because it is an educational matter, that you could just let them know the council would prefer the county commissioners weigh in on it. That would be my recommendation.
Sounds like a motion. If you make it, might get a second.
So moved.
Second.
We would need to hold the public hearing open until we have resolution. Right?
Okay, so I'm going to reopen the public hearing on Lindenwood education.
You have to set it for a date certain.
Well, we don't know what the date certain is going to be.
Is 2 weeks, March 4th, enough time for you to have those conversations, or you need a month?
I'm an advocate on behalf of the city attorney. I give her some time.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know that I think 2 weeks is going to be
first meeting in May.
Yeah, perhaps.
March 18th.
I would say May. Give her some, because she's got to.
Because it's attorneys and they're going to have to reach out. I mean, I know the representative attorney is here, but she's going to have to call. There's going to be some calls that have to be made, and we're talking attorneys, and they have more than just this to deal with.
I would suggest May.
Yeah, the first meeting in May.
Yeah.
Okay, so we will hold the hearing open till the first meeting of the council in May. All right. Next, we have the petition annexation AX 2424, which is 5901 Jeffries Grove School Road and 5829 Creedmoor Road.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. We have an annexation request here on Jeffries Grove School Road for about 1.69 acres. On the map on the screen, you can see the existing boundaries of the city's corporate limits, so our tax base, where property owners pay taxes and the city provides services. That's the hatched color. I'm trying to draw here. You can see the non-hatched or colored areas are the city's ETJ. There's a cluster around Jeffries Grove and Creedmoor, and then one over to the west off Ponderosa. The subject site is gray. So the property under request is surrounded on all sides by corporate limits, tax base, and our service area. The property has an approved development subdivision for 17 townhomes on the site, and water and sewer are nearby, as you can see on this map. You can also see the existing subdivision in the area as well, and water and sewer are just north of Jeffries Grove School Road. This is the zoning map. The site was rezoned in 2016, R10 with zoning conditions, mostly residential zoning in the area as well. Along Creedmoor, you can see office and commercial mixed-use zoning districts. Pretty flat topography on the site. An aerial view, again showing the approved subdivision. There are two existing houses. I believe at this point they may have been removed. The site is surrounded by wooded lots associated with the adjacent subdivisions, and there is some trees on the frontage on Jeffries Grove as well. And this is the subdivision for the 17 townhomes. And that's my presentation.
Thank you. Now we'll have questions. Councilor Jones and then Councilor Harrison.
Sure. Okay, yeah, just I'm curious, do you have the 10-year financial impact analysis that you can bring up?
We do.
I just want us to go into this in a little detail because we did have a great discussion at the council retreat about the benefits and costs of these annexations. And I wonder if you could just take us through this. I realize no one can see it probably out there. Maybe you can see it on your computer. I can see it on mine. This looks like a good deal for the city. Could you tell us more about that? Am I reading that right?
Yeah, I will defer to my colleagues in budget. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right, good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Allison Bradshaw with the Finance Department. Yeah, this will definitely be an eyesore for many to read. We have been utilizing this 10-year financial impact analysis since 2023. So at the time, we did a benchmark with what other municipalities in our area were doing, and specifically, we found that Durham had been using this for some time. So the model really looks at only the general fund, and it looks at property taxes that will come as a result of the increased assessed value. And it also looks at sales tax, specifically when we're looking at residential, meaning more people coming in the area, we would expect our sales tax to increase. The model is a very simple approach for what can be a very complex calculation associated with growth, as you just noted, especially with the timing of necessary capital infrastructure. So the model also does not account for any community benefits that arise as a result of the annexation. So one a little later on your agenda today is actually a low-income affordable housing for seniors. So the financial model isn't smart enough to take that into consideration. It also does not look at enterprise operations, because arguably those are going to pay for themselves, and what I mean by that is predominantly like solid waste or Raleigh water. So, I mean, I'm happy to do a line by line if that was your preference, but I just wanted to give you that sort of big picture. Again, this is a rather simple approach to, again, the timing of when, again, mainly capital infrastructure would need to come online to support these areas of annexation. So I would not want a positive or a negative to be taken extremely literal, because we have conservative growth rates here, et cetera. So a lot can change in a 10-year window here in the city.
So just to clarify a couple items, the sales tax is the assumption that people are moving from outside the city?
Yeah, I mean, generally, that's what we've got to assume, and we look at it more on a population basis. So the assumption is that with new residential opportunities, those are additions to the population and not monopolizing from another area. Again, that's just our key assumption.
Okay, so maybe a more conservative assumption would be like 50% of these people are from outside the city or something like that.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, so that would affect the amount of sales tax. And then when I'm looking at this, just to make sure I've got the right number at the end, the estimated cumulative impact at the very far right corner, that's positive for fiscal year 2033, 34?
34, correct.
Yeah, and is that the number I should be looking for?
That is correct, yeah,
Okay,
that sort of bottom corner number there, because what that does is that looks at it essentially over this time horizon with some conservative growth assumptions of our property tax as well as our sales tax. We do look specifically on the timing of expenditures. Again, we base that on a big picture budget view. We only look at public safety, transportation, and parks. And then again, we try to time, again, from a big picture perspective, when those capital investments would come online, again, using the budget as our basis. But ultimately, yes, that bottom kind of corner number is the one that if you wanted to look at this literally with all those factors, this particular analysis would be net positive over a 10-year horizon.
And just one more question, is inflation considered in any of these values over time?
Yeah, we haven't really figured or incorporated inflation. We've just assumed our normal growth rate. So sort of property tax at 2%, sales tax maybe a little stronger. That's really as sophisticated as this analysis gets.
Thanks.
Councilor Jones.
Thank you. As we look at this chart, because we have 4 annexations, and 2 of them are negative and 2 of them are positive. This is one of the positive ones. And so in 10 years' time, whatever you guys are calculating to get to that number, if I look in the chart 5 slots before that, we're at 51,000, 50,000, 40,000, or 49,000, and it's going down. So how do you guys use that or how should we use that as information? Because it looks like 5 years from 2033, it's going to be in the negative.
Yeah, I think that's really looking at it maybe on a per annual basis. So if you do look in the very beginning, what we're assuming is the city is going to generate some of that revenue initially early on, but those capital assets necessary to support these, so again, I know we talk a lot about fire, those would come on later, but I wouldn't want to pin it to one annexation case, because that's where it gets a little tricky. We can't necessarily say, or I would not want to say, that as a result of this one annexation, we're now need to go make all these capital investments. You've got to look at it as a totality of an area, and that's why we're trying to use sort of the law of averages, which again may be fruitful or not.
I guess that's where, and maybe that we don't need to take up like a ton of time here, where I can speak to you separately and you can help educate me on it, because it's hard when I'm looking at all of these if we're getting a bunch. I understand this one case, and I'm not saying, we should just deny this one and we will save everything, because we won't. Right. But if we're continually in every annexation looking at negative, 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 I need to understand how on earth that makes it responsible to not, and how it doesn't add into what we listened to from our department heads when they said we're not making enough on annexations. And I get for the 200 acres, like that makes complete sense. This is much smaller. I know they're not going to be at fault for that, nor am I blaming it. But if we're making these decisions on an every hearing, public hearing, doing some annexations, I don't want to just be saying yes, 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 and then cumulatively going, okay, well, we saw that coming, so maybe there's just something I'm not understanding. But as I looked at that, that really struck out to me this time.
Councilor Silver.
I just have a question about the effective date, so I understand, because I'm looking at this motion to approve, and I'm just, again, it's the first time I'm doing this. It looks like I have several dates as an option, as well as another part that talks about extending utilities. So can you explain to me, so I understand, why choices are listed for February 18th, June 30th this year, or June 30th next year?
Sure, I'll let my colleagues in planning
Okay.
back up to answer that question.
Allison, stay close, though, because my question's going to be for you.
Okay,
in a
I'll
minute.
stay close.
So the question is, why do you have options for?
I want to know, because I'm planning on making a motion, but I'm given 3 options for dates. So I don't know the implication if it's February, June this year, or June next year. So I see there's another part that talks about including authorization to extend utilities. So I don't know if that's tied to the effective date. So, hi, Bynum.
How are you, Councilmember Silver? It's great to see you. Bynum Walter, Planning and Development. You do have 3 options in front of you. We offer you those 3 options based on state annexation regulation. The first option is annexation effective today, service available effective today. And then the other 2 options are the way the state statute is worded. You have that option that you could delay until June 30 of the current fiscal year or June 30 of the subsequent fiscal year. So depending on where you are in the fiscal year, that could be pretty big difference, right?
Okay.
So here it's like an 18 months difference. It could be as much as a 24 month difference. In May, it's a smaller difference, right?
Got it.
And then my understanding is service is not available until then with the deferred annexation. And we have your fellow council member, Patton, may want to talk. She's been a proponent of some deferred effective dates, so she may have some information to share with you on that front about her thinking, why she's gone that route.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to jump in and add some color to why we started exploring the use of delayed effective dates. At the beginning of the prior term is when we were informed that the formula that had been used to calculate fire service sufficiency changed. And so as a result, some of the assessments of whether sufficient service was available were also changing at that time. And, when we annex, whenever that's effective, we're agreeing to provide all the services available to the city. But so there was a period of time where there were a lot of annexations coming through in my district where there were these emerging fire concerns, and it felt not comfortable to me to say that we were going to open up all city services to be available immediately. And so in the intervening time since then, we've initiated the fire master plan, which will return soon, but that's when they started seeing them presented this way, and that could be a time when it might be appropriate, and an occasion like this one where it's surrounded on all sides, it might not be appropriate.
Okay. That's why I thought this is a donut hole, so to speak, that's being filled. Okay.
Allison, I just had one question for Allison. Yes, welcome back. Going back to this fiscal analysis, so you kind of spoke to this, but I just kind of want to put a fine point on it. Like, sometimes we see these and they're revenue positive. That bottom right corner is a positive number. Sometimes we see them and they're revenue negative. Can you just confirm my understanding that most suburban patterns of development are typically revenue negative, and that the revenue positive centers of our city are like downtown, North Hills, and other commercial centers, and so it all sort of all goes into the wash and comes out a little bit even, so long as we don't tip the scales too far in either direction.
Yeah, I mean, certainly my colleagues from planning and development could opine on that maybe better than I can, but a little bit to your point, when you are looking at assessed values, again, the primary revenue generator for the general fund is property tax revenues. Those higher assessed values are more centralized in your core. And so I think to offset what you just said, that's absolutely correct. You would not necessarily think of I think, what is a 17 townhomes, right, to be a major property tax generator just based on, how those assessed values are established.
All right. Is there a motion or, yep.
Well, I'm sorry?
Oh,
you didn't do the hearing
that's
yet.
right.
I'm sorry.
Sorry. Opening the hearing on AX 2424 5901 Jeffries Grove School Road and 5829 Creedmoor Road. Closing the hearing. Now.
Okay, let's see if I can. I move to approve the annexation of the property in question with the effective date of February 18, 2025, as well as placing the property in the appropriate electoral district.
Second.
Any other discussion? If not, all in favor, aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. All right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, the next one we have is AX 2824, 3800 Auburn Church Road, and we have Robert Tate from Planning and Development.
Good afternoon, Council. Robert Tate. So this is annexation petition AX 2824 for 3 parcels totaling 8.93 acres along Auburn Church Road. So this site is also within a donut hole of the primary corporate limits and inside the ETJ, and is also associated with an approved SPR. Here is an overview of the site and location of utilities. So water is already accessible to the site along Auburn Church Road, and sewer is along the southern periphery of the parcel. Current zoning is predominantly industrial in this area. You'll find that pretty common along the Jones-Hausers corridor going towards Garner along the I-40 intersection. The site has some topographic features, but no floodplain. Another quick look at the site. So here's that approved plan. It's for an office and warehouse space of about 12,000 to 13,000 square feet. Here's a ground view of the site, which has a current use, which is still associated to that industrial and office use. And that is my presentation. Any questions?
Questions for Mr. Tate?
Just one question. Do you know about how many jobs they're bringing to this area, or has economic development shared that?
I'm not sure about that. The applicant did not provide that, but I believe the applicant is here.
Okay.
Open the hearing before.
Oh, yeah, okay. We will open the hearing on 3716 3800 Auburn Church Road, please.
Yeah, so you might have to repeat the question for me.
How many jobs are you all looking to bring to this area?
So I'm just the engineer representing the client, so I'm not sure. They currently work in the facility that's on site, and so they're planning on building a newer, larger facility next door, and then they're going to look to lease out the space that they have now. I've been in there before. The office is probably like 20, 25 people.
Okay.
Councilor Harrison.
And what is the company or?
American Plumbing. They plumb single-family homes.
Okay. And I just want to note a couple things I saw in the application, and this might actually be back for staff. So it looks like it is negative in terms of the fiscal impact, so there is a cost to the city. I also see that National Fire Protection Association standards are not met for the site. Perhaps that would be from fire. Could we hear more about that?
Yep.
Good afternoon, Herbert Griffin, Fire Chief Emergency Management. Councilman Harrison, this meets the needs is just like many of the other ones. The fire service response times are elevated, especially for the ladder trucks in this particular one. It goes to say everything I've continuously said for the last 2 years. It's going to be compelling for us to meet those needs for service in those particular areas. We do try to modify it and add more resources to those dispatches, but over time it's going to drain us.
Thank you. And I will note with the fiscal analysis, it's negative 95,000 as of fiscal year 2033. It's negative basically from 2027 on. The negative, as in cost of the city, keeps growing. So the trend line is for that to grow. So I don't have an opinion about this case. I think I'm just trying to put some information out to our council so that we can start to think about, are there lines we don't want to cross when it comes to these fiscal impacts, and what numbers are concerning to us?
And I just want to jump in on just piggybacking on that. And I'm not saying I understand it, because this is not something I've brought up to the table before. But as I look on that, and there's another one that's going to come up that's going to be negative $319,000 in the same fiscal year. So it's, as we talk about balancing, and if we're going to have the high density to balance and offset this, then it's I'm struggling understanding why that's something we're not talking more about.
I have a question for Chief.
Yes, sir.
I know the response and everything for a home and for a warehouse. Can you speak to, if this was a house being built here or if it's a warehouse, the distance is the distance, so the time would be the same regardless. But can you speak to a warehouse structure and what goes into their bill that may assist you all?
Well, residential structures versus warehouse is space allocation. And residential normally doesn't come with sprinkler system as warehouses do. Now the need for ladder trucks become more apparent with larger structures because you have larger flows of water. Residential structure, the problem is it's a high life hazard. So we go into a different mode of rescue when it comes to residential structure as opposed to commercial structures. Commercial structures also bring hazard materials, right? So there's a lot of things that go into a commercial, plus the amount of people. Right now, currently, we dispatch 10 apparatus. With a commercial structure that big, you're going to get more apparatus, roughly 16 apparatus going to one structure on a commercial based on the level of it. And that's going to come through dispatch. It'll come as an LB, a large building structure, or a medium building. So it's totally different. The more we build mixed use, we have to accommodate that with the assets to send for dispatch.
And on average, how many big structure fires do we have a year?
Roughly right now in the city of Raleigh, we have 4% fires, 2 of those are working, 2% roughly working fires. But 11 of our stations make over 45% of the fires in the city.
Great, thank you.
I think for the record, we need to get the gentleman's name that's speaking on behalf of the applicant.
My name is Luke Perkins with Swift Partners.
Thank you. Any other questions for, yes, Councilor Patton?
Yeah, just while we're trying to have a broader conversation around pros and cons of the tax revenue and the fire response times, could we also ask the city attorney to chime in? All 4 of the annexations we're considering today are contiguous and inside of the ETJ. Consideration for denial, would that carry any legal risks?
They still get water.
I think certainly the expectation is, because it's in the ETJ, that the council would approve the annexation. But as we have talked about in closed session, we are revising our process to make sure that these come to you earlier in the process for consideration.
And one question for the attorney or for our staff. If this was denied, because it's in our ETJ, they can still eventually connect to water at a higher rate. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And I'll just jump in no way, I don't know that I'm sitting here saying, oh, we should deny I think that having this conversation so that we can say, all right, where are we going to make up that money in 10 years, and having a plan for that and answering that, that's more so what what I think the conversation needs to be. Because as we listened in our council retreat, the accumulation of all the annexations, whether they're big or small, are draining our staff. And our staff is coming up saying, we can't. And I need to be able to tell my residents, what that is. So I want to be able to say, in this, we have a projected loss and negative, but this new, the approval of 30 stories, that's actually going to offset that. And that's really the conversation I'm trying to have here, rather than an approval or denial.
I agree with Councilmember Jones. That is good to disclose to the public, because you're right. If you look at it, most single family is being subsidized over the long term for infrastructure. We don't have a similar impact analysis. I'm going from 20 to, from 20 to 15 to 10. So I'm not sure that this would be difficult to have this conversation here at the table, but in general, you are making a good point. We just don't have that kind of information as we look at zoning cases, that as we say, no, it needs to be less dense, fewer units, less intensity. What is that fiscal impact of A versus B, which actually would offset that? So you do make a good point. At the same time, there is a donut hole that needs to be filled. And if you look at the entire footprint of the city of Raleigh, you do have this throughout. And so, there are a lot of considerations to weigh. Yes, this one, if you look at it, is a net loss over time. As Councilmember Branch was saying, asking about the jobs, is this a permanent improvement on the property? Could it change over time? Those are some variables. Putting the building aside, do we want to fill the donut hole is what I'm thinking of as we have this conversation. But you make a very good point. And we currently I don't believe, do that type of fiscal analysis in zoning cases. That should not be the only consideration. There are other factors, which is what we discussed. So you make a valid point. I'm just not sure how we can resolve that right now here at this table. But to me, the donut hole of filling it in is also important as we look at our entire city.
I'll just say, I just want to finish it up with, as we talk about it, rather than a win-loss, say yes, no, how are we saying exactly what your point is, which is, this is why we're making this decision. We don't want to, if it's within our ETJ, there are expectations that these are the promises that we made, that we're going to accept it. And on top of that, it's going to bring jobs and everything. So I think to give the residents a fuller understanding of the complexities of that, that's what this moment is for. I feel like that's what public hearings are for, so that they don't just look at it as, oh, you're just annexing everything, you're just saying yes to everything. When we can say, this is why we're saying yes, is important for transparency.
All right, any more questions, or I can close the hearing? All right, closing the hearing. Do we have a motion on this case?
So, excuse me, Madam Mayor, I move to approve the annexation by adopting the ordinance annexation property on February the 18th of 2025, and to adopt the resolution placing the property in the appropriate electoral district.
Second.
Any other discussion? All in favor of the motion, aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. All right. Thank you. Next, we have petition annexation AX 2924, 2312, and 2316 Trowick Road, and 2315 Andor Place. This is in District C. Matthew Burns.
Good afternoon, Mayor, members of council. Matthew Burns with Planning and Development. So this is a request for annexation for a site in Northeast Raleigh, located along Trowick Road near Skycrest Drive. The three parent parcels that made up the request are just under 3 acres, and it has since been subdivided into 32 parcels for future construction of townhomes, but has not changed ownership. It is associated with one approved site plan, and there is one subdivision plan that's currently in review, but the site is vacant. The request is in an area of known fire service consideration, being outside the standard fire response time for an initial full alarm response, and the topic of service delivery will be evaluated with the fire service master plan, which is ongoing. The site is contiguous to corporate limits to the west and east, and contiguous to the ETJ everywhere else, so it's also a donut hole. There are utilities along Traywick Road. Both water and sewer are available on the site, and here on this map you can see the platted townhome lots. The site's zoned R6, residential 6 currently, and surrounding zoning is also predominantly residential 6. The site is fairly flat and there is no floodplain on site. Here is an aerial and a snippet from the subdivision plan that I had mentioned earlier. And finally, here are a couple of views of the site. So this is south along Traywick Road, then north along Traywick Road, south along Andor Place, and north along Andor Place. Please let me know if you have questions.
Questions? Okay, I will open the hearing on 2312, 2316 Traywick Road, and 2315 Andor Place. All right. Closing.
So, Madam Mayor, I will move forward with the annexation effective date of February 18th, 2025, and place the property in the appropriate electoral district.
Discussion. All in favor of the motion, aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. All right, ayes have it. Next, we have petition annexation AX 3024, 2900 Creech Road, and we have Mr. Tate.
Hello again, Council. Robert Tate with Planning and Development. So this is annexation petition AX 3024 for a property at 2900 Creech Road. This site is approximately 2.3 acres. In zone CX3, there is an associated ASR under review for a 50-unit senior apartment complex. Water and sewer is accessible to the site along Fox Hollow Drive and is also outside of the NFPA response standard times. This is also a donut hole annexation, so surrounded by corporate limits on all sides. And then just want to note that this site is within 1,000 feet of the annexation agreement line with Garner, so they have been notified about the public hearing. So just showing a quick aerial of the utilities, like I mentioned, along Fox Hollow Drive. Zoning predominantly in the surrounding areas residential, but there's this node of commercial and office mixed use kind of at the southern terminus of Creech Road. And then here are a few street views for your reference. I'm available for any questions you may have.
All right, questions? All right, we'll open the hearing on the property. Do I need to? Yeah, 2900 Creech Road. Any other? Yep. Closing it on 2900. Do we have a motion?
I move for approval of annexation effective date of February 18th, 2025, and placed in the appropriate electoral district. And this closes a donut hole.
And one question, I'm sorry, was this for affordable housing? Did I miss that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, all in favor of the motion, aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. So ayes have it. And next, we have street name change in a section of Chester Road to be renamed Pettiford Road. And we have Will Shoemaker here from Transportation.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. Good afternoon. Sorry, I'm a little bit late. Will Shoemaker from Transportation to talk about street name change of Chester Road. This is a staff-initiated street name change. It started in 2024 when we reached out to the public. Pettiford Road, jumping down a little bit, we reached out to the Raleigh Historic Commission and asked them if they had any recommendations for names, and they recommended Pettiford Road based on a Mr. James Pettiford, who was a free black man who was a tenant farmer for the Morkeys and purchased a 16-acre tract of land just south of this intersection. So this renaming is going to honor his legacy. The next slide is going to show a map of what exactly we're talking about here, but we're really only renaming about 175 foot of Chester Road between Chester Road and Oberlin Road, and the map will clarify why we're renaming the same street name. There are 0 properties addressed off this, so 0 properties are impacted, and we're going to be recommending the street name change to be Pettiford Road after this. And so if you look at the map here, we are really only talking about that little finger between Chester Road and Oberlin Road. When the interchange, there were some road reconfigurations, and so right now it's causing confusion to drivers where you're coming south on Chester. It says continue on Chester out to Oberlin, and a lot of people are just continuing south through that intersection and then hitting Elmsford Way, which is a private street, and it's causing some issues with that HOA with people turning around and causing damage with some of their streets. We've worked with that community for quite some time, trying to increase signage, trying to increase markings in there. It just hasn't worked, and then through our continued work with them, a private development has come in, and that site right there is coming in for townhomes to develop, and they want to address off of this new private street that was recently constructed through the apartment complex. It's currently unnamed, and so that gave us a great opportunity to go ahead and name that private street, have it continuous, go from this stub street through their site, because it did create this 4-legged intersection where it didn't exist. So we're doing a lot of positive things with this change to increase the consistency of the road network, the naming conventions, allowing a new development to have proper E91 addressing, as well as trying to increase or I guess decrease driver confusion with this weird Chester to Oberlin connection through here. And so our recommendation to you as a council today is to adopt the street name change from Chester Road to Pettiford Road with an effective date of April 1st, 2025. And I'm here if you have any questions.
Do you have any questions? If not, we'll open the public hearing on the change from Chester to Pettiford Road, and then I will close the hearing.
Make a motion to adopt a resolution changing the name and have it be effective April 1st, 2025.
Okay, any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Ayes have it.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have rezoning Z04245009 Lewisburg Road.
Good afternoon, Hannah Reckow, Planning and Development. So this hearing for this rezoning request, Z424, was opened at your last meeting on February 4th. It was deferred to allow the applicant to revise the zoning conditions, which they have done. Specifically, Condition 5 pertaining to affordable units that the owner would provide. The duration of that affordability was amended. It used to read 10 years, and it now reads 30 years. All the other conditions remain the same. So happy to answer any questions you have.
Okay, any questions for Ms. Reckow?
Are you doing the development agreement presentation separately?
Yeah, I think we have that material available again. I don't believe there are any changes with the development agreement, though. Yeah.
Okay, well, I'll open the hearing on Z04245009 Lewisburg Road, and I will close the hearing. Any motion?
I move to adopt the proposed consistency statement dated February 18th, 2025, contained in the agenda materials, and to approve the zoning amendment with the adoption and effective dates described in the agenda item under recommended action. This approval is also deemed an amendment to the future land use map to the extent described in the adopted consistency statement.
Second.
Any other discussion? If not, all in favor of the motion, aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Ayes have it. Next, we have the development agreement, DA 125 for 5009 Lewisburg Road.
Sure. There's been no change since I last presented this, but just real briefly, it is to construct a greenway trail that starts on the city property, Wallingford Drive, but is mostly going to be located on private property adjacent to the city's greenway property, and it's going to continue across Lewisburg Road with a new signalized pedestrian crossing. And there's a cost-sharing agreement in this, and the trail is to be completed by the time the 50th unit is ready for certificate of occupancy. I'd be happy to answer any questions about the details of the agreement, which is in your agenda backup.
See Councilor Patton moving her microphone.
Oh, you know, I always got questions. Can you share, so this, we're doing like a 50-50 split. They're going to construct it, and we're going to offset the cost by about half. It's about $500,000. Can you, it sounds like it's a split of some cash reimbursement and some credits. Can you kind of talk through that for the public?
And although I want to stress that while there's dollar figures in the agreement, there's also language that gives some latitude to city administration to adjust the sources of the payout depending on specific conditions. But essentially, the city's authority to collect facility fees, which we collect for open space and for roadway projects. For impacts, they're essentially impact fees. It's from the city's charter, and the city charter allows on the open space side that if a landowner dedicates land for open space, that they can deduct the value of that land from their facility fee payments. So one of the payment mechanisms is because they're dedicating a significant amount of the site as a public access easement that the trail is going to run across. And of course, that makes it unbuildable, so it's valued as if it were a fee simple interest. That is one component of that. On the roadway side, you can also deduct if you build a roadway project that's over and above code requirements, either dedicating the land or the actual capital cost, unlike the open space fee, can also be deducted from the fee calculations. Now, this particular project under the current fee structure at full build out would owe about $2 million worth of fees between the open space and the roadway fees, thoroughfare fees. Because of these reductions, it'll be a lesser number than that, but it'll still be, again, significant revenue on the facility fee side. Now, what you can't do is pay for any of the capital costs of constructing the trail facility. So the roadway crossing, the signalized roadway crossing is estimated at approximately $200,000. That would come out of a credit against transportation facility fees that would be due. The balance of the city's roughly $500,000 input into this $1 million project is going to come out of capital CIP money. So that'll be a cash payment. So I hope that clears up all the numbers that are in the development agreement.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yep, Councilor Jones.
I just wanted to, first of all, thank you. In this development agreement, I know last time we asked about park maintenance costs, and I wanted to thank Parks for responding, but I was wondering if you could come up and just let everyone know what those costs will be and how we're going to absorb them.
Good afternoon, Stephen Bentley with Parks. Yeah, our park operations staff, which is by a crow flies, is about a half a mile from there. But we calculate it's around $6,000 or $7,000 a year. Considering the size of the parks budget, we could absorb that into our current operations.
Thank you so much.
All right, any other questions? All right, so I will open, I'm of course already getting lost on which one I'm on. Open the hearing on Z 2024, 721 Chapel Drive. Close the hearing. Do we have a motion?
Oh, sorry, okay.
I move to adopt the development agreement.
Second.
Oh, you're right, I'd named this the wrong.
It's okay.
I should have opened it on DA 125, 5009 Lewisburg Road. Right, and then close.
We got
Gotcha.
there.
Okay. So we had a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Nay. All right. Thank you. All right, next one. Yep. Number 11, yes, Z 2024, 721 Chapel Drive.
Yes, Z 2024. This hearing you opened at the last meeting, February 4th. It was deferred to allow the conditions to be revised. Those revisions include one to the condition pertaining to affordable housing. Detail has been clarified that the number will be rounded up to the nearest whole number. The others remain the same, so happy to answer any questions you have.
Okay. Questions for Ms. Raquel? Nope. Okay, so I will open the hearing, C-2024, 721 Chapel Drive, and I will close the hearing. Do you have a motion? Okay. Do we need to close it?
She did.
Okay, thank you. I move to adopt the proposed consistency statement dated February 18th, 2025, contained in the agenda materials, and to approve the zoning amendment with the adoption and effective dates described in the agenda item under recommended action.
Second.
All in favor of the motion, aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. The ayes have it. All right, and that concludes.
So, Mayor, if you would like to go back to 1009 Seabrook Road,
Okay.
finance staff confirmed that the payment was made at 1:30 p.m. today.
Okay, so I should close that
Yes.
hearing. So I am closing the hearing for 1009 Seabrook Road.
No action.
Okay, thank you. All right, next we have the report and recommendation of various committees, and the only one that has anything actionable, right, Transportation Transit, so you're going to advertise?
That's right. Transportation and Transit Committee will meet next Thursday, February 27th, from 3 to 5 here in the council chambers. I will not be in attendance. Councilmember Lambert Melton will preside the meeting, and Councilmember Harrison will be able to sit at the table in my stead. Our topics will be the NCDOT high crash intersections and pedestrian improvements at East Whitaker Mill Road and Atlantic Avenue.
Okay. All right, and that's the only report out of committee. So I'll go to the report of the mayor and city council. And Councilor Harrison, I'll start with you, if that works.
Yeah. I just want to thank Wake County Commissioners, Tara Waters and Sophia Jackson. They visited with me to look at some library sites over the weekend around Athens Drive Community Library. And we had a great time. We actually went to Well-Fed Community Garden, which is one potential option. They are looking to make some changes. So as we drove around, we just had a really good conversation. And I want to just, again, thank them for their partnership as we consider how the library bond is going to impact and really contribute to our Raleigh residents, our library assets.
Just wish everyone to be safe tomorrow. We are on Wake County Public Schools will be closed, so kids have fun.
Just a few things. The next District E community meeting will be on Wednesday, March 12th from 6 to 8 p.m. at La Cucina Italian Restaurant. The next is our book club, Decoding Democracy Book Club, which we had our first meeting last Saturday. It was great, some great conversation. So please join us at Oberlin Regional Library on Saturday, March 15th from 9:30 to 11:30 for that. And then lastly, I have had the privilege over the last few weeks of attending the majority of my assignments for boards and commissions. And it's been great conversation, but what was uplifted and what's come to the top for me is the continuation of our discussion at council retreat. What is the definition? What does that look like? And so I didn't remember exactly what we said about that. Will that conversation continue in work session? Do we need to send it to committee? How will we close the gap on what we started in council retreat? And I'll ask the city manager.
So it is scheduled for a work session, I want to say in April, to bring that item back. And that will be taking all of the feedback that was received at the retreat. We tried to get it in March, but there are too many budget items that we're trying to, or items that have budgetary impacts. I probably better to say it that way, that we need to get done in March.
Perfect. Thank you
Yes.
so much. And I will let everyone know as I go back next month that it'll be coming back in April for further conversation. And then on that same topic, for CACs, we have been in contact with the leadership of CACs, and we are still working on getting our schedules to match up so that we can continue meeting and conversing with them. So everything is sounding good and it's hopeful for next month. So thank you so much.
So I had two issues. The first is the public comment. We have had a lot of discussion on this, so I wanted to bring it back to the table. We currently have 1 hour on days like today. We have 3 hours on the second Tuesday. I am proposing that we move from 3 to 2, so we have a total of 3 hours a month. I know I've heard from a lot of folks. Many people don't want changes. I think there's also, right now we're using 2.5 hours a month, so if we have 3, it shouldn't have any huge impact, but creates more predictability for staff, council, and still meets that, what has on average been 2.5 hours a month. So I would make a motion to go from 3 to 2 hours on the second Tuesday. Second. All right, is there any, yeah.
Yeah, I just had a couple of remarks on this topic. While the discussion, I think, on public comment might be trivial to some, 2 or 3 hours, when we typically do not surpass 2 hours, the question for me is more about trust and priorities, what we spend our time on. And I do want to show our commitment to listening to the people that we represent. If public comment is the forum they choose, I will be here. And I do feel especially strong about the issue right now because of our state and national political climate. Many of us are struggling to talk with friends and family these days, myself included. We're challenged in listening to others with differing viewpoints. And I don't want us to limit our exposure to alternative perspectives. Is it challenging to listen to public comments sometimes? Yes, it is. Have I been called out in ways I find unfair? Yes, I think we all have. But I do value the space because I learn a great deal about where our residents are coming from. And I know the public doesn't have all the answers or even necessarily the facts, but neither do I, depending on the topic at hand. And I think, again, in this particular climate right now, when votes supposedly don't count, when we have folks like Judge Griffin falsely claiming to have won a North Carolina Supreme Court race, when election violence is pardoned, what we saw with the rioters on January 6th, when government employees are fired without cause, which is happening to many of my colleagues, trust is lost. So I just want to encourage us to continue to have City Hall be a trusted space where people know their voices will be heard. So no matter what hours we end up with, please keep coming, keep talking to us. We want to hear from you.
And then I'll just add on, I echo, I can't put it as eloquently as you just did, Councilor Harrison, but as we look to what feels like unwarrantedly lower the time that people are allowed to come to us, I challenge residents, you need to look and see where your representatives are listening to you. Where do they have that space? If they want to cut, if we weren't going to cut time here, where are they making it up? So please, whatever the vote ends up being tonight, please remember that you are your advocate and I need you to ask those questions. Thank you.
Okay, any other discussion? If not, all in favor of the motion, aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye. Nay.
Yeah, okay, so that's a 5-3 vote, and thank you. The second,
We're leaving it at 7 o'clock start time, is that correct?
yes. The second issue is just panhandling. I know this is an issue. Many of folks here at the table have had different concerns, both for the individuals out there, concerns for the public safety staff trying to enforce some of the laws for citizens. No easy answer on any of this, but I would just make a request of the city attorney and staff to come back to the council with your thoughts on how we better address this circumstance, both in urban areas and on highways across the city. This is not unique to any one area. No date certain, but if you could just come back with your best thoughts on how we should better address it. Thank you.
Well, that was one of my council items, so thank you, Mayor, that you eloquently spoke about. We just want to respond to a lot of what we heard, but to be very responsible. So very grateful to the city attorney, and it was the deputy chief of RPD, that Raleigh Police Department, that understands that we have to find a solution going forward. The only thing I'd want to note is that as part of Black History Month, I'll be spending part of my Saturday with Miss Octavia Rainey. I left the flyer in my office, but I'll be very excited to spend a good portion of my afternoon in East Raleigh. I'm sure there'll be a lot of surprises that day. So I look forward to spending part of my Saturday with you.
In keeping with tradition, I just want to lift up a couple good things we did during through the consent agenda today. One that's been on my radar for a long time is we put a no parking tow-away zone on Old Buffalo Road. This is an area where I've gotten a good amount of community feedback, and I just think the neighbors will be glad to see that in place. We also approved contract for services for referees and umpires, and this was needed because post-pandemic participant registration across, this is a quote from the agenda item, post-pandemic participation registration across all the athletic leagues is increasing by 7 to 12% per year. And I continue to think of the phrase social cohesion, and it's a comfort to me that Raleigheites are spending more time gathering together, engaging in joy and community, and also physical activity. So those were the two I wanted to highlight. Other items I have, my next office hours are Thursday, March 16th from 6 to 8, location to be determined. And then I recently received a constituent concern from a resident who lives in Bedford who experienced a house fire and had a difficult time meeting the requirements to rebuild in effect, like essentially their same house. And I believe it's related to some onerous forestation requirements. And I'd just like to better understand the piece of the UDO that tripped them up, what was the spirit of it, other scenarios where this might be creating unintended barriers for residents. So if I could just get a report and a manager's update related to that.
What was that address?
I don't have the address there. I live in the neighborhood of Bedford, and I
Okay.
think planning staff is already aware of it.
I just want to uplift what the mayor brought up. I've had some folks reach out to me too about issues, particularly downtown with some of the panhandling. One thing that Wilmington does, and this may already be on your radar, Madam City Manager, is they have posted notices signs about panhandling, but the signs also have a section that says there's a better way to give, and there's a QR code to a landing page with like resources where you can make contributions. And so I think that strikes a good balance. So I'd be interested in seeing something like that where we're providing some clarity and then also maybe some assistance. And that's all I have.
I guess we all want to weigh in on the panhandling thing. But I would also ask that the city attorney's office be involved, especially as it relates to intersections and traffic lanes, because, you know, I literally today saw someone panhandling, walking in between cars, trying to get money when the light's red, and certainly when it turns green, that person's in the middle of the street trying to collect money. So certainly any information about restrictions, particularly around traffic and intersections and things like that. And other than that, no report.
All right. So now we move on to appointments. Bicycle and pedestrian advisory. Well, I will turn it over to Ms. Pritchett.
Thank you. First, as you started off with, Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Commission, 2 regular vacancies. We have several nominations here that will be coming back on your next ballot. Jim Brennan was nominated by Councilmember Jones. James Thrasher was nominated by Councilmember Lambert Melton. And Councilmember Harrison nominated Sean Fernandez and Brittany Bryan. So all of those 4 names will be coming back.
Can you list me as a co-nominator for Brittany Bryan, please?
Sure.
She had asked and I forgot, so thank you.
Next is Design Review Commission, 1 alternate vacancy. Councilmember Patton nominated Anand Quesada, so that will be coming back. Human Relations Commission, alternate vacancy. Jakarma Allen received 8 votes, so would be appointed. Planning Commission, 2 regular vacancies. A few things going on here. Jessica Cochran received 5 votes. However, there were several nominations made, and I understand there may be desire to hold. I'll just go ahead and read the nominations that were made on the ballot. Council members Jones and Harrison nominated Nick Neptune. Councilmember Branch nominated Jason Kress, and Councilmember Branch nominated Talulupe Omakaye. So it's up to the council as to how to proceed with that item.
I was just going to say, historically, if someone received 5 votes, we went ahead and moved forward with it, and then that still leaves an opening.
Yeah, I would go ahead and if she got 5 votes.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think there will be more nominees coming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you don't mind, if I could be a co-nominee for Talulupe Omakaye.
All right. So I'll bring back the remaining regular vacancy with the 3 names. Next is nominations. Board of Adjustment, 1 regular vacancy. Slight change from what is advertised in the agenda packet. Dr. Stephen Kenny's term is expiring. He initially said he wanted to be considered after the agenda was published, changed his mind. So the council may wish to consider elevating the longest serving alternate, which is Ryan Torrey, to a regular slot and declare an alternate vacancy at the conclusion of his term.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, yep. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
All right, so I'll bring that alternate vacancy back. Next is Environmental Advisory Board. A request has been submitted by the board chair to remove member Zoe Niebuhr. Per city code, the chairperson may submit a letter to the city council requesting a removal of a member due to missing 3 consecutive unexcused absences. The letter from the chair, including additional information, was included in the agenda packet for consideration. Also included was broader attendance information.
Move to accommodate the removal request from the chair.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? All in favor of the motion? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Nay. All right.
So that vacancy will be coming back on your next ballot.
Can I go ahead and nominate Tina Scott for the newly available vacancy?
Sure. Next is Fair Housing Hearing Board, 1 regular vacancy. The term of Cassandra Hextall is expiring, and she would like to be considered for reappointment. Per council direction, information was provided in the agenda packet relating to her attendance.
So moved.
All in favor of the motion? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay.
And lastly is Raleigh Transit Authority, 2 regular vacancies. Terms of Jennifer Truman, who was your chair, and Sarah Prado are expiring. Ms. Truman would like to be considered for reappointment. Ms. Prado does not. Past practice has been to elevate the longest-serving alternate member for the outgoing slot, which is Johnny Lee Thomas, and declare an alternate vacancy. So 2 things to consider here: the reappointment of Ms. Truman and the elevation of Mr. Thomas.
Move to reappoint and elevate.
Second.
Okay. All in favor of the motion? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Nay.
And then Cassidy, I have a nomination for the new vacancy for the alternate that created, William McKinney.
Okay.
Thank you.
So that alternate vacancy will be coming back, and that's it.
Thank you. All right. Next, the report and recommendation of the city attorney.
No report.
And then we have the report and recommendation of the city clerk. Hopefully you do better than the education institution.
Mayor and Council, your agenda materials included draft minutes from your February 4th and February 11th sessions.
Move for approval.
Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right. Okay. And we do not have a closed session
We do
today?
not.
Okay.
That's our gift to you today.
All right. All right, well, everybody be safe, and thank you. We are adjourned.
The quorum.